Good morning to everybody who is joining the room right now. We'll give everybody a few minutes to get in and get situated. So say 2 minutes, we'll start introduction. All right, so is there anybody else that needs to come in, Jessica? Is that it?
Nope, we're good to get started.
Okay. Well, good morning. Welcome to Provider Support Subcommittee today. We are happy to have everybody here. We have a jam-packed meeting, lots of presenters today, a couple new ones. And so today we are going to have everybody do introductions. We haven't done introductions in a couple meetings, just with how busy they've been. So we'll start off with your name, where you're located, and then the name of your center or agency and department that you're from, just so we can all be familiar with each other. Now, let's see. I will start off. My name is Katie Hudkins, and I am one of the co-chairs of the Provider Support Subcommittee, and I'm also the owner of Treetop Village Child Care Centers over on the peninsula. So, Julie, I will let you go next.
Morning, I'm Julie Schroth. I'm located over in Kitsap County, and I own a center.
Okay, Marlene.
Good morning, everyone. I apologize, I'm off camera. I'm heading back home after dropping my kids off, but I am the Community Engagement Manager here at DCYF. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for coming this morning. How about Dave?
Morning, all. Dave Mayer with the Office for Catholic Schools, the Director of Early Childhood Education. I help support the 56 early learning programs that we have up and down the I-5 corridor from Vancouver to Bellingham.
How about Emily? Is she there?
Sorry. Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
I'm usually not the only Emily. So Emily Grossman, and I'm with the community engagement team. I'm in Seattle. Thank you.
Jamie Desmo.
Hi, I am also dropping a child off at school, so I'll be on camera shortly. My name is Jamie Desmo. I am the Director of Early Learning for the Whatcom Family YMCA in Bellingham, Washington.
Well, thanks for coming. And then Janelle.
Hi there. I am Janelle Waterman from Newport, Washington. I have Lucky 9 Childcare. We are an in-home provider.
Wonderful. Thank you for coming.
Yeah.
And then Katie Chinese.
Good morning, everyone. I'm so sorry. I have pop-ups over my monitor and it wouldn't let me hit the unmute, and there we go, off camera too. So good morning, everyone. I'm Katie Chinese. I'm part of the DCYF team within the Early Learning Division, and I'm joining from Olympia, Washington. Happy to be here.
Wonderful. Thank you. And then how about Katrina?
Hi, I'm Katrina Karen. I'm with Northwest Center, and we're in downtown Seattle.
And then Melissa.
All, Melissa Cheeseman. I'm located in Rochester, Washington, so it's rural Thurston County. I work for DCYF as their senior policy advisor, whose portfolio is early learning and childcare. Good morning.
Wonderful. Thanks for coming, Melissa. How about Amy?
Hi, everybody. I'm assuming Amy Russell. I might be the only Amy.
Thanks,
Hi,
yeah.
everybody. I'm Amy Russell. I am here in Olympia, Washington. I work at the Department of Children, Youth, and Families. I am the deputy of the Early Learning Division. It's nice to see you all.
Thank you, Amy. And then Michelle.
Good morning. My name is Michelle Aguilar. I'm assuming it was me, but there might be other
Yes.
Michelles, so sorry if there are. I am a regional coordinator for early achievers in Southwest Washington, so I'm in Vancouver, Washington right now. And I'm actually filling in for Danielle Vanderloop. She is the regional coordinator in Eastern and wasn't able to make it today, so I'm filling in for her.
Wonderful. Well, we're happy to have you.
Thank you.
And then how about Nicole?
Good morning, everyone. Nicole Rose, Assistant Secretary of Early Learning at DCYF, and I am in Olympia and happy to be with you all this morning.
Thanks, Nicole. And then is it Rochelle Wessel?
Good morning. My name is Rochelle Wessel. I am in Lacey, Washington, and I own the Foundations of Faith Children's Academy Child Care Center.
Great, thank you. And then Ruben?
Good morning, everyone. Ruben Reeves, and I'm the Assistant Secretary for the Licensing Division of DCYF. I live in Puyallup, where I'm at now, but I work primarily in Olympia. So good to see you all.
Good morning. And then Susan?
Just when I was about to take a sip of my coffee, you called my name. Sorry about that. Hi, Susan Brown. I am actually working out of Linwood today where I live, but I work in Seattle and I'm with Kids Co. It's a nonprofit childcare organization. It's great to see you all. Thank you.
Yes, good morning. And then Taylor?
Good morning, I'm Taylor. I am the Quality Assurance Continuous Quality Improvement Program Manager with Childcare Licensing with DCYF out of the Vancouver office, but I'm located in Portland.
Oh, good to know. And then Vicky?
Good morning, Vicki Greger, Spokane Valley, Owner Director, Spokane Child Development Center.
Welcome. And then I know there was a few after, so Mika?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mika Riggins from Child Care Aware of Washington, and I am coming from the lands of the Puyallup people.
Well, nice to have you this morning. We have somebody with, it's LY. I'm not sure who that is, but if you want to say good morning. Or maybe not, LY. All right. If you haven't done an introduction, just go ahead and take your mute off and go for it.
I'm Angela Wheeler from Tacoma Community College.
Hold on, are you on there now? Or Janelle, did Janelle go?
If I'm the only Janelle, I did.
Okay. All right. And I do want to say we do have an interpreter on here today, Janine Horton. She'll be doing all of our interpretation services, which is exciting. All right, did everybody go? All right. Well, welcome again to Provider Supports Subcommittee. It is April 17th. It's sunny at my house, but yeah, it's the middle of the week. So let's get going. And then next slide. We just want to make sure that everybody is mindful of everybody's, thoughts and comments that they, oh, what's that? Oh, never mind. And we want to make sure everybody gets a turn to talk if they would like. So, all right, Julie.
Thanks, Katie. So several documents were sent out to everyone on the committee. If you are not receiving those documents, you can put your email in the chat and get on the community engagement email list. The meeting minutes were sent out. I think they're gonna put them up on the screen and also put a link in the chat. Some of the key things that were discussed last meeting and are in the minutes. We talked a little bit about the supervisory review process. Travis had said that there's a robust process, and I think we would be interested in having a broader discussion about that down the road. There was some discussion about child care check and what shows up and first time forgiveness. We talked about the licensing and CPS investigations and how those, how the feedback document that we're working on, which we'll talk about again today. There was a lot of feedback. Self-reporting came up because it's a big concern for providers when self-reporting shows up, and especially when it's something rather minor. Anyway, we also discussed background checks. Of course, we're all affected by the new rule or the implementation of what was already the federal rule. There was some discussion about the access and living wage proviso. And that was actually, there was some updates in the agency update document that was sent out about that. And I know that something in that document said that, it's probably Nicole, but it said that somebody's doing feedback gathering on that with different groups. So, and then we had the feedback loop that was also sent out. You also may have seen an email went out, I don't know, a few days ago about a recruitment process for ELAC. They're trying to get a panel together for their June ELAC meeting of providers that have been impacted by TK in their community, the transitional kindergarten. So what's missing on their panel right now is folks that have been negatively impacted. Sometimes preschool programs have been, the preschool classroom in a program has been shut down or severely diminished when those kids are then recruited into TK. So if you are a provider that's been negatively impacted by TK in your community, you can email community engagement. You can email me if you want. I'll put my email in the chat. You can email the co-chair of ELAC, which is Lois. I'll work on getting her email in there. But they do need some diverse perspectives. So even if you are not that person, if you know someone who has been negatively impacted by TK, please reach out and we'll see if we can, get that over to the co-chairs of ELAC so they can include them in their panel. We also got an update on the child health care consultant thing. Many years ago, we had Jennifer Helseth on a meeting, one of these meetings, and she talked about a nurse consulting program that she was implementing at the time, and it sounds like it's going well. It said in the feedback loop that there was a note that there's 250 nurses with her program. There's 2 counties, Garfield and Klickitat are the 2 where nurses have not been identified. And I think at some point we'll probably have Jennifer on one of these meetings. Lastly, there was an update about the licensing visit provider survey. Really, it just means a survey that you would be emailed after you've had a monitoring visit. And they're developing that, and then they'll bring the survey forward to us. I believe it'll come to this committee and we'll be able to have some feedback, but right now they have to figure out what goes on behind it, where it's going to go, what they're going to do with the data, who's going to get the emails about it, how they're going to implement that. So that's where that's at right now. There was also an agency update that went out, and I touched on that a little bit with the living wage and proviso. There was some information about the CCDF plan. And then there were some rules under development for FFN and relative care, capacity waivers. I don't think the capacity waivers are for centers. I could be wrong on that, but it's probably for the FFN and
For family homes, yeah.
Thank you for that clarification. Okay, then let's see, there's also rule making under development for prohibiting behaviors, discipline, and physical removal of kids. It looks like they're making some changes to that. So if you go back and you look for your email, through your email that came from community engagement, it would be the document attached called agency updates. So the other one is there was a memo attached. It was the response memo about the TLS recommendations. And so if you have any questions, and I think Nicole and Ruben and or Travis, I'm not sure who wants to address if there's things that they want to share about that or questions from you guys that can be answered by them. No questions at this time. Nicole, is there anything you want to share about that?
Oh, I'm happy to jump in and have Ruben jump in as well. I think part of what we were really trying to do here was take all of the recommendations that were made. I think Ruben and Travis and I did a preview of this a couple of months ago and trying to just really make sure we were noting where we had moved forward or where things would require legislation or other pieces, but give a response that really is responses that you all have given us, just organized in a different way. Ruben, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think we're happy to get this, finalized, and we can, tweak it as we go, and we are happy to get it, finalized and up the website. I also want to just part of the TLS recommendation is to schedule these in-person regional forum meetings, right, with our local region, local community. So just had another meeting on this yesterday. So look for that in the next few weeks. We're going to start getting them. I think our first one's going to be in the Spokane area, and we're looking at kind of next month, and just meeting with the local licensing team and also with early learning staff. So looking forward to that for this year, next year, of really being in person and diving into some regional work too.
And the other thing I'll note as we're doing this, we are really looking forward to those in-person forums. But the thing that we're also going to try and do as we talk about our decision packages or things that are getting funded is to really tie back not only to what was in our Fair Start for Kids Act recommendations, but in our TLS recommendations today. And when Melissa and I talk a little bit later this afternoon and share some draft ideas, you'll see where we sort of note what was a FSKA recommendation. And I'm using that as a broad umbrella to look at both the FSKA and the TLS recommendations as well. And I see Susan has her hand up.
Yeah, I was wondering, how is this? So I was at a meeting a few months ago where OSPI unveiled their 8 rules for TK. What rules are you talking about, and how does it apply to public schools or not?
Susan, I'm not quite understanding your question.
Well, I mean, you're asking for, there's a thing going around with questions about, like, for instance, coordinated recruitment and enrollment, and DCYF's guiding that process. But there's also rules that OSPI has developed about the same subject, about TK, and there's 8 of them. So I guess what I'm wondering about is how is all of this being coordinated? The rules for at DCYF, are there rules that are being developed for TK at DCYF? No? What are the rules?
So I'm wondering if we can maybe, so this is, just to clarify, this is separate than the TLS tracker.
Yeah, I think it'd be really beneficial if you're able to attend the June ELAC meeting where they're going to be discussing TK with a panel of providers. And if you know someone or are that person that's been affected by TK, your center's been affected by TK, your enrollment numbers have been affected, then it would be great to have you, or if you know someone, to be part of that panel.
Yeah, I did actually submit my name to Erin Kerrigan because of working in public schools for 35 years. There's so much more to this, I think, than just that coordinated enrollment. So I will do that. I apologize.
No, it's okay, Susan. I was just trying to track back. So what I can say is that OSPI is the one developing rules for transitional kindergarten. DCYF did receive funding for coordinated recruitment and enrollment. And Melissa and I can talk a little bit about that later. That doesn't require any rulemaking related to that. So just want to try and close that loop.
I mean, to be clear, DCYF doesn't have authority over OSPI and what they do, and OSPI doesn't have authority over what DCYF does. So that's the point of contention for a lot of providers. I know that they're allowed to do whatever with their rules with early learning kids that sometimes they've even recruited out of our programs. So Lorena, did you want to, I see your hand up. Did you want to unmute?
Hi, good morning. Just very quick. Since we're talking about licensing, I want to thank everyone in DCYF, whoever's doing their part, because all this year we've been listening we've been hearing from other providers a lot of good things about licensing, coming into their places, doing whatever they're supposed to be doing, being more polite, more professional. And so I just want to thank them because they did listen to our concerns and they're taking in consideration everything that was happening, and now they're trying to fix it, and they're doing a really good job. Keep it up. Thank you so much. And that's it. That's all I wanted to say. Just make sure that they know that we know what they're doing, and whatever they're doing is working. Thank you.
Well, that was nice of you to say.
Very, very nice, Marie. I appreciate that. And Travis and Debbie Groff are in another meeting. They'll come in later, but I will relay that message to them. And I really appreciate that feedback. We have a ways to go, right? But I think we're heading in the right direction. And so I really appreciate that feedback. Thank you.
So lastly, I want to mention that this committee, as you know, we have 2 chairs, myself and Katie. In the past, it's been a tri-chair situation where we've had 3, which is really nice when someone is unable to attend. And we really would like to get back to that tri-chair setup. So please, if anybody's available and interested and willing to work with us and in planning the agendas for these meetings, reach out to community engagement, and we would love to have some more participation on that. So anyway, I think we've hit everything. Does anyone have questions about the meeting minutes or the feedback or the agency updates? It's a quiet group today so far. Okay, so I'm just going to ask if, I'm going to look, is Sue Rose and Lisa Thompson already here? Maybe we can move on. Okay, I'm not seeing.
I don't see them.
Okay. Well, that's excellent, Dave. Do you have DCY, the community engagement email to submit your name to? Maybe Jessica can drop that in here. Thank you. Oh, and there's the email. Thank you. So we are ahead of ourselves by quite a bit. So why don't we go back to I'm wondering if, oh, she went off screen. Maybe she's not really here. I was thinking we could go back to Nicole because I would love to, if she's available, hear more about the community outreach that you're doing on the living wage proviso. Is that something that you are able to share a little bit about what you've heard so far, or if that process has started?
Yeah, I'm happy to share, Julie, and I have no idea what happened. My camera has stopped working, so I really am here. So I'll try and fix that after we have this discussion. And I think we are likely probably trying to get a hold of Stu and others to see if they can join early. So
that's great, because I know there's other topics that are going
yeah.
to eat more time than we have. So
I'm going to see if maybe Amy or Katie can reach out to Sue Rose and team and see if they can join early. So there's a couple of things happening on our access and living wage proviso work. So one of the things that we did do was we have had I think the webinar where I think both ELAC and provider supports were invited to participate that Diana recently led. And we are also working with Washington Communities for Children and their networks to go and have some community conversations. And I would invite anyone who is here who is participating in that to chime in as well around some specific policy areas, looking at facilities. I know one of the things that has come up in this group and came up in ELAC again recently was around the living wage piece and how do folks want that to work, or sometimes we hear how we don't want that to work. An example is at the last ELAC meeting, someone said, please don't do that through merit. So we're going out and trying to ask so there's varying opinions about sort of what people want there. I was just using that as an example. And so those conversations have happened with Washington Communities for Children. There has been a survey that they also sent out to members. And then we're also doing some engagement with IPEL and then with some of our staff at DCYF, as well as we look at what do families who are involved in child welfare need access to as they're thinking about childcare, and then how do we think about some of our staff that are doing who are working in 24-hour facilities, what type of care is needed. And I think one of the things, we're also asking about is what do providers need when they think about providing non-standard hours care? Like what would that look like, and what are some of the things that are needed there? So those conversations have been happening. I do not yet have preliminary feedback to see what we are hearing. The other thing that's happening is that child care also has their partner.
Nicole, can you hold on a second? Lorena Miranda she unmuted herself and she's talking over you.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Nicole. Sorry about that.
No worries, Mika. I was actually looking to see if there was a magical mute button, but there wasn't. Sometimes that appears. So I have not yet seen the feedback that is coming in, but that I know is coming in soon, and we'll start taking a look at sort of what are some of the themes that we're hearing. I think I was starting to talk about Childcare Aware and the partner roundtable work that they're doing, and I know that they've been engaging a variety of groups as well. And I see Susan has her hand up.
Hey, Nicole, I just wanted to share, so I heard from one provider, I don't know if there's others who've experienced this, but when she tried to do non-standard care hours like into the night, the problem that she ran into is they have to keep all the ages separate, and there wasn't demand for like full classrooms. And she couldn't staff each classroom with a teacher with, one or two kids. And combining children, even while they're sleeping, is not allowed. So I think that is a barrier to non-standard care hours that I think needs to be explored further.
I will take note of that, Susan, and note that, and I know Ruben is here and listening and others, so we can take that back and look at sort of what is the actual rule there.
And she shared, and I don't know if this is true because I didn't confirm it, that the same is not true for family home centers where they are able to combine kids. So I think there's a double standard that needs to be corrected anyway. So I appreciate work in that area. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll take a look at that. And I know I want to acknowledge too that just non-standard hours care in general is something that continues to come up about sort of what is an effective, not only kind of business model, funding, and just how to do it. And sometimes it's not always consistent that someone needs non-standard hours care. And so it is, I know something that labor unions and others have really looked into. And if I'm recalling correctly, I'm going to lean on Melissa here a little bit. There was actually a piece of legislation that was passed this session that looks at, I think, some specific, I'm going to say trades, but that's not the right word, but some specific jobs around non-standard hours. Did that end up passing, Melissa, or am I making that up?
But I think what did end up passing is, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, is kind of it's kind of tangent and related to what you're talking about, is for the construction workforce, children for construction workforce, near site and on site. The other study didn't make it into the budget.
Yeah, sorry. So many different things happening, and there's been a lot of interest in it. So there were some different conversations happening back and forth. And thank you to Katie who dropped in the chat that it looks like there's going to be a listening session on the 21st of May to hear some of the high level takeaways from some of those listening sessions that happened with WCFC. And it looks like we have all of our presenters here. I see John and others. So I think if we're ready, Julie and Katie, do we want to turn it over to?
Yeah, I don't see Sue yet, but I do see Lisa.
And I think we may be okay. Lisa, I'm going to turn to you for a moment. I think we might be okay if Sue isn't here, as long as Lisa is here. And I seem to have lost everyone, but I think we're good, because we're really going to actually turn this over some to our partners. So Lisa, are we good?
Yeah, we're good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, hi, everybody.
Thank you so much. Thanks for jumping on early.
Yeah, no problem. Glad to. So we're here to talk about the revision of childcare basics and the next, am I able to, oh, there we go. So here today with me are also Dr. Don Williams from Cultivate Learning and Keohei Wong from Schools Out Washington. So we're going to talk about just a brief overview of the revisions, and then seek your input on content topics and next steps. All right, so oh, mine changed. Sorry. The goal of the revision really is to go beyond just the revision of existing content, but will also include a reimagining of the organization of the modules, the sequence of delivery, and the higher levels of accessibility, including language and cultural relevance, and also to include the topic of healing-centered and trauma-informed care, and to really align the childcare basics and school age basics topics while kind of reimagining how that is age appropriate. And I'm going to turn it over now to our partners who are going to share the progress that has been made on this project. And thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. Hi, all. Ko-Hei Wong, she, her pronouns with Schools at Washington. So as Lisa shared, the goal of this work is not only to update the content, but also to better align the childcare basics and school age basics content areas to create stronger consistency across the work. To do that, we compared the different sets of WACs and core competencies, noting points of alignment, as well as like the age appropriate places where we differed. This is helping us to streamline information and also while also being able to develop content that's specific for the audiences served. So in collaboration with DCYF and Cultivate Learning and Schools Out Washington are working together to develop outlines and content that will be shared and reviewed by both agencies. And then just to note, aligned content means that we have the same or similar topic areas, but are making adjustments to the media and or activities or examples based on the appropriate audience. I'll turn it over to Dawn.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you. I'm glad to be with you all today. I love, in one of our meetings, Ko-Hei described this alignment as going to your cousin's house. And I thought that was a great way. Basics is still in the same family, but what we have differences based on how things are age appropriate. So for example, here's some content that's from the health and safety modules. And so in childcare basics and school age basics, we both use that same hand washing slide because it's a standard slide that people use. But in that next example about when to wash hands, there's differences. Like there's when to wash hands in a early childhood environment has different details than when to wash hands in a school age environment. So it's things like that where we've got the same topics, but we're differing in that. And we did that to help streamline, but also to make it so for folks that might go from a school age environment to a childcare environment, the information will be still supportive no matter what age group that they're with. Go to the next slide. Well, another thing that we're really trying to do as we are going through this revision is change how we do multilingual content development. Over the years, we've been working with DCYF to change and get better at that and to move away from writing something in English and then translating it into other languages. So for this project, we have content writing teams that are made up of English, Spanish, and Somali writing teams, starting from the beginning. We also have design teams that we're doing with language. So our Somali writers often meet with the Somali community to look at ideas for content outlines, and they're seeing it multiple times along the way so that when things are written, it's reflective of those audiences. We also have a few different processes. Translation is when we have something in one language and we just translate it to another. The simultaneous multilingual design means from the beginning, we're starting together as a team to try to determine how a word or a phrase, or like the trauma-informed care content, for example, trauma isn't a word that's used in the Somali language. So they're using other ways and means to describe it and trying to get everyone to be on the same page of it. So for example, like the content in Somali and Spanish might have some more slides than the English content does, but that's because we're trying to develop the content that is appropriate and using the right language, just because especially the way we use lots of acronyms in English, there's other ways to break things down that'll make it more clear in those languages. And then transcreation is that process where there's not translation that happens at all. We work from, our content team comes together, we decide on an outline, and then someone writes in English, someone writes in Spanish, and someone writes in Somali. And so we're also doing that with some of the modules here as well. So this is an area where we've really needed to make some improvements, and with basics, we're trying to make moves in that direction.
So a little bit about the training format. So we are planning for both synchronous, which is facilitator-led in person or virtual, and asynchronous, which is like online or self-paced delivery of the workshops. Both childcare basics and school age basics will remain 30 hours each. And then just a note that per the WACs, the childcare basics content will continue for infants, toddlers, preschoolers, and mixed age groups. And then the school age basics content will be for school age only programs. So all of those things will remain the same. And so if we can go to the next slide, here's a place where we're interested in a little bit of feedback from you all. So pulling from the previous versions of basics as well as the core competencies, like these are the current topics for basics in the basics outlines. And then just some things I wanted to note. Environments includes curriculum and learning environments. And then when we reviewed side by side the early learning core competencies and the school age core competencies, it aligned pretty well, but I did want to point out a few areas that differ for school age basics. Primarily in like the relationships segment, in school age basics, we include schools in that. And then also we have a segment in school age basics on youth empowerment or youth voice. And then outside of those topics, I think both the school age and early learning competencies overlap pretty well. So everything you see here are the topic areas. And I wanted to pause and provide some space for comments and check in about these topics. Feel free to drop anything in the chat or unmute. Yeah, I see a hand, I think Hodan.
Yes, hi, thank you. No, I'm just curious on, was there a reason why special health care need or disability was left out on this list?
Dawn, do you have,
There's some light touches on that integrated into the child growth and development sections, and some in environments and some in interactions. And that's the way that it was done in basics before. However, we would love to be able to do more on that. And if you think that it needs its own topic, is that something that we should add? There's some things integrated into these pieces, especially when we get into like the screening and assessment and what to do after if you find that there are some concerns after screening, and we put that in the child growth and development sections. But yeah, it should be its own topic.
The other thing we noted too, I think in our discussion around alignment or around topics, was also thinking about this as the 30-hour basics, right? So like that this is not the end of an individual's professional development, this is the start. And so really thinking about like wanting to dedicate, like I think there are certain topics that require, like we just think needed more time. And so that could be something that shows up in a further training, like further down the line.
I would 100% challenge you that the hardest part about coming into childcare as a new person is working with children who are harder to work with. And that would be children with some sort of disability or difference than what you expect. And I think that actually requires that we spend more time on that in the childcare basics. It's probably the #1 reason we lose new teachers is because they don't know what to do or how to do when we step out of the classroom and we're not supporting them at that moment.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that, Angela. I'll take a note of that too, for sure.
I agreed. And I think in the ways that it's integrated, it would do it more justice if we were able to pull it out as its own topic as well. So it both and it shows up in both places.
Anything else anyone seeing?
Yo tengo una pregunta. Lo único que en mis reacciones no sale para levantar la mano.
Jacqueline is saying that she wants to raise her hand. ¿Cuál es su pregunta?
Sí, mi pregunta es relacionado con los entrenamientos que DCYF mandó sobre el trauma. Y quiero referirme a los premios. Yo
Is there
Jacqueline, ya
interpreter today?
no te podemos oír.
Bueno.
Ya se
¿Sí?
oye.
Oh, ok. Yo estoy hablando sobre los premios que DCYF mandó para que las personas que tomaran el entrenamiento sobre el trauma fueran recibidos. Yo los tomé.
Stacy, is your comment directed at the whole group? Is there a way that we can then hear that translation, or? I'm a little confused. Is Stacy able to?
Her question is around the Trauma Informed Care Awards, so I will write her in the chat how to connect about that with DCYF.
Dave, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thanks guys, and thanks for this presentation today. And you may address this later on, so I don't know, not knowing how many slides you have, but I saw it earlier about the asynchronous piece to this. Do you envision a future in which there's just an evergreen link to a recorded childcare basics that people can just go to, register, and take? I think there's still some significant clunkiness to getting registered for the class outside of actually paying for a third-party vendor to be able to provide it for you through DCYF. I just wonder where the conversations have been about that in the past, and if that is something that is actively being worked on or talked about for the future.
Lisa or Sue Rose, if you're on, I think you might be best to answer that question. We are building it so that's asynchronous, so that people can just log on and take it through Articulate 360. But that evergreen link part.
Yeah. Thanks, Dawn. Thanks, Dave. It is something that is on our mind, just as we think about access, just as you said, Dave. How do we make this readily available without the clunkiness and challenge of like being able to access or find training? So it's on our minds too. So I don't have a great answer right now, but I can definitely talk more with my team and get back to you.
Awesome. And I would also advocate in that same conversation that equal and pace go that same direction.
Yeah, absolutely.
It just makes sense in the age that we're in now, that people could log in and do these modules at the time that they need with quizzes at the end or whatever it might be to be able to show compliance. But I think that we're just the time and staffing and things like that that go into how it's being operated now seems like we could become more efficient, both for DCYF and for the staff that are trying to get access to the training.
Great, thank you. I agree.
Cool, thank you. I appreciate it.
Let's see, I see Janelle. We'll take one or two more questions, and then if you also feel free to drop things in the chat, we can take note of it.
Just on a related note to what Dave was saying, just making sure that that online training is like good to do on a phone. Because I feel like a lot of times it's better suited for a computer and very hard to navigate on a smaller screen. Just something to consider because a lot of people don't even have access to computers or laptops necessarily, but they have their phones.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your feedback. I'm going to turn it back over to Dawn for just one more.
Yeah, it looks like Janelle has a question, has her hand up.
Sorry, that was me. I'm done. I put my hand down again.
That's okay, it happens.
This is very helpful to hear from you all about what the needs would be for this, because it's perfect timing. We're building things now. If there's and also one of our other questions here was around the order of things that you think should be coming first in the order that people are getting the topics. It's all still going to be a part of the 30 hours. But if there's some thoughts or preferences around that, we'd love to hear that as well. Or anything else that would make delivery or implementation easier. This is very helpful to us.
Looking at the list, I would, if I was the decider, I would move health and safety and positive behavior supports up.
Okay. Yeah, this order right now doesn't necessarily reflect the order that it's going to be in. But health and safety first, then positive behavior supports.
I think when you have a new teacher, somebody that's new to the field, sometimes, especially moms are great, but they get very used to in their own homes saying, no, stop doing that or whatever. And that's not what we want to hear in the classrooms. And so it's a habit that we have to break and say, I need you to tell them what they can do. And so it would be great if they came in learning that very quickly with the STARS stuff.
Got it. Thank you. Holden, I see your hand up.
Yes, hi. I just want to add into as you guys are presenting these topics, also provide resources, right? For example, the positive behavior, just having discussion itself, I think it's helpful, but also provide, okay, these are the resources that you can share with families, or you can use while you're in the classroom or in home, providing these kids. And then I think I included in the chat language access, including this conversation around language access. And I'm going back again, disability and special healthcare need, it should be on the top of this list as well. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. Thank you.
Thank you.
I also want to just mention that back in the day, we all did STARS in the classroom, right? So we were surrounded by people and we heard stories, we networked, we collaborated, we sometimes got advice from the other classmates. So I'm wondering if there's, when I mentioned the positive behavior supports, are there example scenarios that you guys go through and say, what would you do in this scenario type of thing?
Yes, we definitely have activities like that.
Okay, thank you.
And for the asynchronous modules, we try to build out communities of practice that people could still engage in so that they could come back to. And that's one of our hopes, that we could do that. So even if you were taking this independently and not necessarily doing it in this group, you could log into this community of practice where other people are posting things and sharing resources and get a bit of that community engagement that you would be if you were taking it in a class together. But we hope to also include that type of a component for folks that are taking it asynchronously and synchronously. But we know that that part can be missed if you just take the online modules yourself on the phone. But it's also very helpful to get that to people. And we're also conducting interviews to capture some of that, capture some of those things that people would say in a training to get other ideas from people. If we have that as interview footage, that's part of the training, or try to incorporate that in that way, especially for the asynchronous modules. Because you're absolutely right. You do get so much from the people you are taking the training with.
There was a question in the chat from Jen.
Thanks, Jen. Regarding restraint training, asking if restraint training will be in childcare basics, and also just to confirm that all required trainings by the state, that way to start, it's a one and done. Thank you for the note. I've made a note of it, and we can look into that and get back to the group.
Okay, restraint's not currently in your 30 hours, right?
It's not currently in there.
And the other trainings that are required, I guess that would include maybe safe sleep and medication management, not currently included. It sounds like Jen's suggesting those should all be incorporated.
Yes, I am. Instead of making this challenging for people, it should just be if I'm taking this training, it should literally cover everything that I need to start and begin. I shouldn't have to jump around to 500 different portals to get this done.
So is that being considered at all?
I think we've had the conversation, and again, I think I think some of the, with including the trauma-informed care unit in the 30-hour, it's making, I mean, just to be honest, like one of the challenges it's making the 30, it's difficult to stay in the 30-hour. And so we've been talking about that, but I think we can definitely like circle back and have a conversation about that, because I think that's something that we've heard also.
Well, and I would challenge the fact that if the 30 hours can't cover this, but it's still required, then why not just extend the hour time frame instead of, again, making people jump around and try to figure out where to go? I mean, it's still a requirement, so it doesn't really matter if you're telling me it's 35 hours or if you're telling me it's 30, I still have to do this.
Mm-hmm. Right, I'm pulling up the list of things that we have in health and safety right now, so I can show that to you all. Just give me a moment.
And then Susan, I see your note about bloodborne pathogens and mandated reporting. I'll add that in with the note around like the requirements. And then Mika, your comment about the flow. I made a note of that. And again, I think this list is not necessarily the order that it's in right now. And so, I think that's a great suggestion about thinking about like knowledge building. And so I have those notes in there.
And Jen,
We'll
I
say
know
this
that you're on your.
I wanted to add though, and I did add to the question because I'm trying to process and think at the same time here, and type at the same time. I wanted to add, I'm just asking a question. If when you're asking what order should the topics be in, and I will say I am not a director, so I feel like I'm wondering if the order that we're putting these modules in should be based upon how do we get teachers to be effective in their first 3 to 30 hours in the classroom versus how does it flow best? Or should it be, how do we build knowledge? How do we make this flow so that it builds upon their knowledge? But that means that it might take them longer to feel comfortable in the classroom, which I think someone has already mentioned, can create some challenges when they're not getting the knowledge they need to be able to be effective right away in the classroom. So that was just a question I was throwing out there, because I think for me, that changes the order of this, of these modules.
Thanks for sharing that, Mika. Let's see, I see Gloria, you have your hand up.
Yes, I want to take the opportunity to talk a little bit about family training. I think in the 30 hours they talk a little bit about dental. But I would like to ask, is a way the kids dental training is in the student portal can be translated in Spanish because we have only that in English and it's very important information, but not all the providers have to access to the training because of the language barrier. If we can have that in Spanish, that's going to be a lot easier for share a lot of information with families. Or we can talk a little bit more about the dental and the 30 hours. Also, I want to share that maybe somebody for training isn't there. Previously in Spanish is had a problem, and the part of they talking about the cribs, their training is stuck in there and didn't pass, and it's having a lot of providers having trouble with that. Also yesterday, that I've been hearing that before for another provider, but yesterday I took the training in Spanish and didn't let me to pass in that part. And I had to go back and take it in English. And English is okay, but not in Spanish. If somebody wants to say notes and take care about that, that's going to be awesome because that challenge all the new providers they're having right now.
Thank you for sharing, Gloria. Let's see. So if I'm hearing, I just want to make sure that I captured your thoughts around translation in Spanish, and then making sure that there's like clarification. Is that what I
Gloria, was it the clarification that you were?
The clarification is if we can add a little bit more about dental aging and the 30 hours in Spanish, or we can translate all this training is in the DCYF student portal. It's talking about the dental care, but it's only in English. We would like to have that training in Spanish in another language, but in Spanish, like the language I am. And that is one thing. The another thing is if somebody can there take care of the safe sleep training in Spanish, and this is why student portal because it's lack and didn't let them to pass to the next conversation. This lack and the part, I think it's part 2, they're talking about the cribs. They need to be fixed. It's a long time having that issue and being reported, but it's nothing happening. Yesterday I trying to do the class and didn't let me pass. And I have to go back and do the safe sleep in English, and that is okay, but not in Spanish. They have to be fixed. This opportunity.
So making sure there's alignment and we've cross-checked and I think I know Cultivate is doing some work with especially with this training, but I made a note also to check back with the safe sleep that's currently in Spanish.
Yes, correct.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
There's a question in the chat box. Will staff have if current staff have their hours, will they have to redo the new one? But yeah, Diana just said that once they have met it, and they are not required to take it again.
Okay. Thanks, Diana.
I think it's good. It's an option though for, when we do have staff that need help or that need, that have been in the field 3 or 4 years or maybe 10, 12 years, and they do need, to refresh their trainings. And if this is going to be a new option, I think this would be great for anybody to take it, not just anybody new into the field. So
That sounds like a great idea as an option for folks. Dave.
yeah, I will just say that I have 55 staff right now, and it's like pulling hair to get them to take childcare basics. And then now that we are in the process of licensing a brand new before and after school for them, for teachers that already are working for me, and then letting them know there's a school age one, you know, they're already just devastated that they have to try to do it again, because it's always been such a hard time trying to get through, whether it's on a desktop computer or their phone. So any updates, I think, would be amazing. And one day maybe be able to just have one umbrella for all types of programs.
I would say the one benefit about this alignment is that we're going to be very clear about what the differences are between these two. And perhaps we can maybe even get to the point where we'll know what's the same and what's different. And we could perhaps even have a list of streamlined topics if someone's moving from like childcare to school age basics, of what would be just school age basics content. And I think through this alignment, we would be able to do that.
Well, that would be really cool. So they wouldn't have to do all the basics over again.
Mm-hmm.
And through the asynchronous learning, I think there's opportunity to be able to pull out like a module here and there, so that like someone may, if they are in a childcare center working in a school age classroom, may be able to take like the youth empowerment segment. So
okay. Yeah. Dave, you have your hand up.
Yeah, just quick, and this might be if Ruben's still on. I saw that Travis joined as well. I would appreciated Diana putting the topics that are covered in childcare basics in the chat. We've had multiple experiences with licensors that are asking staff to complete like mandated child abuse and things like that, those 5 federal health and safety standards, outside of them completing childcare basics. And so I don't know if that's just it's new licensors coming on and they don't understand that those things are included in childcare basics, but we've had many experiences kind of throughout the state where staff are being asked to do both. So it sounds like a messaging piece that we need to get out to the licensors and the supervisors.
Thanks, Dave. I actually would like to have more of a conversation with you about that, so that we could narrow down if it is certain licensors that are doing it, so that we can address it. Okay.
Yeah, I'll reach out to you, Travis.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Cool.
And Julie, I see your hand up.
I was just going to say pretty much what Dave said. I was so glad that Diana put the list in the chat, because I've heard in other groups that that's a real problem as well. Not only the licensor aspect of them asking the provider to have their staff take it, but the director or program supervisor themselves just thinking that they have to. So there's not a lot of clear understanding from providers or licensors that it's all contained within the 30-hour stars. So thank you for putting the list in, Diana.
Janelle?
Just on a related note, it seems like we could solve that if Merit would be populated with those dates when childcare basics was complete. If those components are already a part of that, then those dates should be put in there. So if I'm looking at my staff, I can see those dates because it's aligned with that course.
Yeah, I did just notice a change on Merit yesterday, actually, kind of on the same note, where now for like the continuing ed, it says completed because they just did STARS basics or they just did equal or something. And I thought that was fantastic, by the way. So.
So I do want to, I see a question from Hodon about, will there be a survey after each session to gather feedback from our audiences? And I wonder if that's a good segue, Dawn, into the next slide.
Yeah, and really it's just a discussion question we wanted to have with you all. We were wondering about your recommendations for engaging providers in this revision. We wanted to come here to talk to you all about it. And next, we'd love to be able to engage providers in some way that, of course, is manageable to their schedules, but really want their input and thoughts and perspectives on what information they need, and not just the order, but what would be best, like that, the feedback today about why not include all of the requirements in here, things like that, I think would be really helpful. And we'd love for folks to be able to review the content as well. So we wanted your thoughts and recommendations on how to engage providers in the revision.
Well, I'll say that the DCYF PD department does an excellent job holding webinars on a variety of topics, and then they post the recordings. I know that the ones that I've been on have been very low attendance from providers. And I just wonder if the DCYF, whoever's running the Facebook account for DCYF could post when there's going to be a meeting, like if you guys, if Merit or STARS, I should say, if you guys want to reach out to providers, if then the Facebook group could specifically say, here's this one training or webinar or whatever it is. And I know that providers would share it widely, but sometimes when DCYF posts on Facebook, it's a laundry list of things that that the post is about. It'd be nice if a webinar on anything geared to providers is just posted. That's it, just that. Oh no, not a DCYF Facebook group. DCYF has a DCYF profile on Facebook. I'm sorry if I said a group. I didn't mean a Facebook group. They have a profile on Facebook.
Thanks, Julie. That's a great idea.
Are provider design groups a good idea, a good way to approach this?
Yeah, I mean, if you wanted to create a design group and maybe people here could email you directly if they wanted to be involved in that.
That would be great. That would work.
Yeah, I think anybody who's on the group is understanding now what you guys are wanting and what you guys were presenting on today. I think prior to this, we were a little confused on, well, what do they mean changes and updates, you know? And majority of us are, you know, childcare, family childcare, and didn't pertain to school age, but there are quite a handful of us that are school age. So I think them understanding what you guys are looking for and that this is going to benefit everybody will help promote some more engagement and working with you guys.
Okay, thank you.
Well, Julie, it's 10:15.
That means we're right on time.
I know we were ahead and now we're on time, but thank you, ladies. That was great. It was a great presentation and for what you guys are doing and what you're looking for. So thank you very much. And hopefully we'll all be in touch with you guys and have you guys back for another provider supports meeting.
Yeah, and if you can drop your emails in the chat in case you decide you want to do a design group, then people will know to reach out to. That'd be great. So we're going to move on to our next agenda item. It is the FAQ doc that we had worked on, providing feedback around licensing investigations and CPS licensing division investigations. So I think at some point we're going to break into some breakout groups, but we've talked about we're going to have larger groups because some of these groups are just 4 people and only one person's really participating. So we might just have like one big provider group where the DCYF folks are not there. So you can say whatever you want without, some people are cautious. They don't want to speak up if DCYF is there. So anyway, so we're going to have Taylor Nussbaum. She's DCYF's QA and CQI program manager. And she's going to provide an overview, gather some feedback, and hopefully, I think she's going to be sharing what was incorporated from our last meeting. So welcome, Taylor. Thank you for being here.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. So I just honestly want to start by saying thank you so much for the collaboration on these FAQs. We have done a couple rounds of revisions now, and I'm honestly just so grateful for the feedback because I think that they're jam-packed with information now. So I think that this will be the final round of receiving feedback and any final edits. So just keep that in mind. I know that there was a comment more about self-reporting being included, and there are some hyperlinks added to the document where you can find information on the DCYF website on self-reporting. So even if you don't see it written in the document, there are links to more information. So there's going to be a lot in there. So when you take a look at them, please click on the links, make sure they're working, make sure that it's helping answer or support the answer in the document. These are kind of just like the final last pieces that we want to make sure that we're providing the sufficient support to go with the answers now. So that's kind of where we're at for this round of revisions. And yeah, so that's kind of where we're at. If you have any questions for me, let me know. Otherwise, I'll just let you all check them out and provide feedback, and we'll just do this one more time. So thank you guys.
If we wanted to start with one, usually it says I'm muted. I'm not muted, right?
You're not.
Oh, okay. If we wanted to start with one of the documents, well, I guess we'd start with a breakout room, but maybe, are you able to tell us which feedback bits from last meeting were incorporated into the new FAQ doc? Or, I mean, I don't want to provide feedback that we've already provided if it's not going to be incorporated, or can we go over that a little bit?
Let me see if I have that. I was provided with a list of all of the feedback, and then I sorted through and kind of made sure that each document either that was added to like both documents, or if it was only relevant to one, that it was added to that specific one. So there was a lot of sorting of the feedback. And just to like, clarify, they are 2 separate FAQs because childcare, like licensing division complaints, those are inspections, and the LDCPS complaints, those are investigations. So the content is different for each FAQ. So keeping that in mind, but let me see if I can find that list of feedback. Okay, I need it here. Okay, so I know that there were some clarifying questions around contacting childcare employees on their personal phones. there's really not a solid answer that we can give on that one. So we added what we could. And I just want to say, like, keep in mind, they are two separate processes. So as much as we wanted to align the answers, some of the answers are going to be different just based on the processes are different. So just keeping that in mind. There was a lot of feedback of like, you need the resources. So we really tried to add as many links as possible because we wanted to keep these documents concise. We didn't want them to be like 5-page FAQs. So we did link a lot to our external site. There were questions around legal representation. You know, unfortunately, there's only so much we can provide in regards to those kind of things. So, like some of this, we just flat out couldn't include into the FAQs because we aren't able to provide, you know, legal advice. So things like that, just kind of like keeping those things in mind. Okay. Yeah, so those were kind of like the highlights last time of what we tried to address. So if that was helpful, that
Yeah, it is
information.
helpful. I do
Yeah.
think that when we provide feedback, it'd be really, it's kind of a note to self type of thing, but I think it'd be helpful in the future if we have presenters come in with all of our feedback and then a response to each one, just like we can't do this for legal reasons, or we've incorporated it here and here's how we're going to do that. Otherwise, we just kind of, it can feel like feedback is just kind of going into a black hole and not being answered yay or nay or why.
Yeah.
So, and I don't really want it. It's like, do I provide feedback again on something that it has been ruled out as not possible, but I didn't know that it wasn't possible, but I'm gonna, so.
Yeah, I would just say like at this point in the process, these are pretty close to a final draft at this point. So we want feedback, of course, but there's only so much we can provide, right? So even if some of these answers are not ideal, like what you would want, some of the answers are just going to stay. So I definitely hear you about being more intentional about like what edits were made and where we want the feedback, but really these documents are made because of the ask, right? Like the questions came from primarily, this group, the providers, the people who want the answers, right? So if you have more specific questions, like please ask them and we will definitely try to include it in there. And that's kind of just where we're at on these things.
Yeah, my main issue with the FAQ docs, and I know that there's disagreement with my position, but the question I think is the same on both lists. If licensing staff requests a full contact list of enrolled families, even when an incident only involves specific children, do providers have to provide that information? Meaning, do they have to provide the full contact list for all families? And it points to 3 different WACs as the answer, but then we have to go track down what each of those individual WACs say. And sometimes those are really lengthy. And it's like, okay, which line are you referring to back up the yes answer that was provided? Because when I read each of these WACs, I did not see anything that was about all enrolled families. It was about specific to the children or child involved in the incident. And I'm sorry, I don't have the language pulled up right now, but I did last time. And so to have an answer that says yes, and then lists 3 different whacks, when it could pinpoint the part that actually backs up the yes. Otherwise, it's just providers are having to go and do more research for an answer like this. So I'm hoping that DCYF can include the specific language that backs up their answer there.
Yeah, I hear you on that. I think it really is situational. I think some of these answers need to stay broad for that reason. I think that you could argue that sometimes it is relevant and sometimes it might not be relevant. So I think just like it's unfortunate that it's not as specific, but I think providing that larger picture is important.
It's not helpful, though, when a provider is asked for their full contact list for an incident that literally involved one child. And I'm going to use the example of a child who, we heard this story many months ago on one of these meetings, where a director self-reported for a child that at circle time jumped up, pulled down his pants, and wiggled his rear at somebody. She didn't know that she didn't necessarily have to self-report that because there was no child abuse or neglect. And it happened as fast as someone could sneeze. She couldn't have prevented it, but she handled it as soon as it happened. So to then be asked to provide your full contact list in that scenario, or to have someone that's investigating say, well, the FAQ says that, yes, I can have your full contact list. It's not a situational type of answer. It's just a yes. And like I said, I've read those WACs and I don't believe there is a yes in there. So I find that providing a yes without the backing up language gives broader authority to anybody that wants to point and say, but it just says yes, that's it. I need your contact list. It's a problem for providers.
Hey, Julie, this is Ruben. Sorry, I'm on the phone. I had to travel in Yakima. So it's a good point, right? And to Taylor's point, it is situational. I mean, I can't see the screen or the wax that's on there, but I also know that in RCW law, it does say now I'm talking about CPS investigations, that the investigator has access to all records in that child care. So when we ask for those records, we should be able to tell you, when I say we, the investigator, of why we are doing that. Not just because we want to, right? So it is situation. We should be able to well, we don't, we have an intake, it's an unknown child. We don't have an identified child, or we need some collateral information. I mean, we should be able to tell you why we are accessing those records as well.
But that doesn't happen.
Okay.
It does not happen. It's literally just this is the requirement, you have to do it, period. And I think that that's the issues that providers are having, is that there is no clear explanation and we are just told, yes, you have to do it, period.
Okay, so that's a training on my end, right? Or on our investigators' end. By law, we can have access to all records in childcare, okay, during a CPS investigation, but it has to be relevant and we need to explain the why. So that's good feedback for me.
I've actually pushed back on that request. And after reading the RCW and going back and forth, it just gets dropped on the other end, because I read the RCW, I say, here's what it says, and then they say, I don't know. When I finally read it and send it back and say, this doesn't say on all children, then the request was dropped. So I don't read it the way you read it, Ruben, with all respect. I just don't. So I just feel like it's so important to list the language that's going to back up the yes, because it's not a yes in some scenarios or yes in depending upon. It's just a flat out yes. So anyway, I want to
Julie, I mean, you make a good point. I mean, interpretation of law, right? I mean, we run into that quite a bit, even with our own Attorney General's office. So we will clean up the FAQ on that. And even if we need to get an AG opinion on it as well, we can include that.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yep.
Jamie, did you want to chime in?
Oh, yes. I just wanted to say that I have a parent in my program that is works with CPS, and I asked her about this because I was really curious, and we had a situation at one of our centers where a staff tripped over a rug while holding a baby, and we self-reported because the parents took the baby to the doctor and everything was fine. No one was injured, but we reported because she went to the doctor, and because the staff was a substitute and had worked in other classrooms, they asked for not only the contact information of the children in that classroom, but in all the other classrooms that she worked in. And when I asked my parent about this, she said, well, it's standard. We tell everybody that they need to do that because we're looking for other issues in the center. So clearly it's not just situational. If the CPS workers are being trained to look for more, it feels witch hunty to me. Like they're looking for more things to bust us on when it's just something like, hey, this teacher tripped and held a baby in good faith. We're reporting this because that's what we're supposed to do. It punishes people for self-reporting. And I feel like it's going to push people away from self-reporting. So it's just my feedback, because clearly what's happening in the field is not the same as what is happening, what we're being told here.
Yeah. And that's often the times where I think practice is happening in the field, and you know, there could be some individual cases where that's not. So here's my advice on that. For that certain situation, I think that is kind of going outside the scope. I'm not sure the particulars on that one. So please contact the supervisor of the investigator and escalate that. It could be a opportunity that we can coach our staff as well, right?
And to be clear, that was not, this was a licensing thing. So this was licensing that did this. This was actually CPS didn't get involved, but I did contact CPS to find out what they're training, because this parent trains other CPS workers, and she told me that too. So it's coming from both licensing and from CPS, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Gotcha. Okay.
I appreciate you sharing that. Melissa?
I just wanted to provide just some helpful context to the WAC, if it's not too late to jump in on that. So the underlining of WAC does refer to the statute that it's, so the way that the structure, right, we have law and the rule that supports the interpretation of that law. And so if you were to go to the link in any one of those, right? So whether you're talking about 110-300, 110-301, or 110-302, what you're looking at really is to inspect agencies periodically to determine whether or not there is compliance with this chapter and the requirements adopted under this chapter. And those are the powers vested to the Secretary of DCYF when we're talking about licensing duties. And so when you interpret the word inspection, and I think maybe that's where there might be made some contention, is what do you mean by inspection? And I was looking at the WAC. You know, the only other thing that I think that might make the WAC more clear is, and I'm just putting this out here, not suggesting any additional work for anybody, is like, since we're talking about a list, those are books of record. And you're right, when I cruise through these WACs, it doesn't specifically call out books of record, but it does basically say that the agency, right, and that's defined also in RCW, has to be available, right? And provide information in an investigation. So I know that that's not necessarily going to address everybody's concerns, but I was just going to provide like that high level. When you're looking at a WAC, I think it's more important to look at the underlying statute that gives rise to the legal authority. And that's where I would start. Thank you.
Yeah, I do want to note the inspection piece is different than an investigation piece. Having access to records is different than handing over a full contact list. And so I do look forward to more clarifying information on that one. Susan, I thought your hand was up. You took it down.
I was just gonna say the same, you know, fishing and investigating are two different things. And I think we want to be careful about, is it really investigating an incident or investigating that incident and fishing for other things that you could, which doesn't make a provider feel safe. And that's not the job of CPS, in my opinion. And it feels like we're being assumed guilty of many things, not just what's being investigated. And I think that is part of the problem with regard to lack of trust, the lack of transparency from DCYF on all these things. I think we really, this fishing business has to end. And I put in the chat that, I mean, providers, families, and children have rights also. And yes, we want to keep kids safe, but we also don't want to put providers in the position of violating people's rights as a consequence of a fishing expedition and not something that's legitimately necessary to come to a conclusion on a CPS investigation. So that's what I was going to say.
Yeah, Susan, I agree with you. We should never be fishing, right? We should stick to what we need to investigate. With that said, you know, we always, you know, in CPS investigation, there's alleged child victims. We also have to make sure all the children in your facility are safe, you know, and so, but I agree. We need to kind of stick to what we're investigating. We're not out to get people, right? You've heard me say that before.
Doesn't always feel that way though.
I know, but that's, Julie, that's the thing. When it doesn't feel that way, that's when it needs to be escalated, right?
And
But Ruben, in all honesty, things get escalated and we feel like it is literally the person sitting next to you guys and they're just like, okay, we agree with them. You're still wrong. Thanks for escalating.
And I just wanted to add, isn't the purpose of the annual inspections the part that addresses, are they in practice, and they're unannounced, right? So in practice, are they keeping kids safe and so on and so forth? It shouldn't be a CPS investigation as the opportunity to now check that all the kids are being kept safe, because that's what the whole inspection process is for, as I understand it. So you can't conflate the two. Again, it sets providers up for failure.
Yeah, and I want to point to the chat. I think Jen said, why does the not valid need to be on a report or provider's records? If it's not valid, it should not be written anywhere. These reports are viewed by insurance companies and have a huge impact on insurance rates, even the ability to get insurance. I didn't actually know that. I haven't experienced that, but that's interesting. The not valids are still being listed. Where are they listed? Are they on child care check?
As far as I know, any not valid finding for childcare licensing inspections are not posted on childcare check, only valid findings.
What about CPS?
I believe that's housed somewhere else.
Now, people they can request like licensing history though, right? So that's public information, so they can ask for licensing history if they want to. And that's what it says on Child Care Check. If somebody wants additional information, they can look into that.
And Travis, that licensing history is what is being pulled by insurance companies right now.
Okay.
And I do not know if you guys are aware of this, but the insurance companies are literally running from Washington State, and actually multiple states are dealing with this. But finding agents to provide the coverage that is A, required, and B, needed has gotten literally crazy. I actually just got back from a conference that talked about all the insurance companies that are dropping and denying coverage.
I
Really?
echo this. It's awful. It's terrible. It's happening all over the state. We are at the mercy of liability insurance companies right now, just jacking up their rates, or you lose coverage and you can't find a new company to go to altogether.
100%.
This is the first that I'm hearing of it. So
Travis, I've heard
It's
of this.
apparently Yeah,
this. It's not only childcare,
it
it's also in
started-
child welfare and child placement agencies.
Yeah.
Insurance companies are.
It's an insurance company thing. It's not a DCYF thing, obviously, but it's gonna really impact the industry event here pretty soon.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily, it is an insurance company thing, but what happens within DCYF and what we are required to do and what is put on our records does have an impact with the outcome of insurance.
Yeah, it's one reason why we don't put everything on childcare check, right?
But it is findable, right?
Yeah.
So as an insurance
Yeah.
company, if I'm asking for insurance, they are 100% digging for that. I mean, the insurance company even asked me what kind of sprinkler system I had. Is it wet or is it dry? And we put it in based off of what the requirements were for the county and licensing at the time, so we could license our entire building. And now insurance companies are saying that they do not like that kind of system. And we are trying to find other companies because they don't like that it's a wet system. But that was what was required at the time. So it is, I'm telling you that, yes, it is an insurance company thing, but the policies and everything that comes through from DCYF has a huge impact on this.
Okay. So it sounds like we probably need to have more conversation about this, especially if it's going to be an issue. And because I just want to remind folks, like, good standing is good standing if you're licensed, right? You might have history in the past, but right now, if you're in good standing, you're in good standing, right? And so maybe we need to have more conversation of what that looks like and describe that to insurance companies. And so.
Well, maybe the not valids can just not be listed anywhere.
Well, they're not, Julie, but
They're
if
somewhere, apparently they're findable somewhere.
well, they're in your history, right? Like, so we have, it's in the system, so you can't just get rid of them. If they're asking to look at all of the licensing history, then we give them all the licensing history is what we give them, and then they're looking through that. So we can't make them go away. I guess it's your licensing history as a provider.
What if you have a neighbor that just hates that your kids are outside making noise and they call complaints every other week? And then that's in my license history that I've got noise complaints constantly, or who knows what they're complaining about because they're upset about noise. So if that's going to live out there, then that's a problem.
It's one reason.
Exactly.
It's one reason why it's important to do the investigations and the inspections, because you tell the full story. We could tell that exact story of what you just said. It's a neighbor who's upset that there's a childcare next door, and we describe that, and then that's in the record so that when another complaint comes in from that person, we screen it out, right? Because we've already looked into it, we've already dealt with it, we know that it's an upset neighbor. So there is the other side of doing these inspections that also protect you all with so it's documented.
I think the
I
problem.
understand you guys having licensing history in your records, but I don't understand it being something that can be searched online by an insurance company. That doesn't make sense.
It can't be searched online. All they can see is the child care check stuff. I think what Jen said is that they are asking for public disclosure of the licensing file to go through it.
Yikes. Okay.
Yeah. Which I did not know that insurance companies were doing that.
Yeah, I didn't either.
Yeah.
So if it's not findable online, then that's good news. I'm a little disturbed that they might be doing what sounds like a FOIA request or something. Do they have to do an official request, or if they just anything like insurance reaches out to you and you guys just go here?
Well, we have people that will do public requests all the time, right? And we don't ask why they're asking for it. We just fill the public request, right? So if they're asking for licensing history, we're giving it and redacting the things that need to be redacted and fill in that request.
Yeah, Julie, DCYF has their own public disclosure unit for all records of people in Washington State. So it just goes straight to them, and they have laws and rules of what to redact or not to redact. We don't get involved.
You guys have any way to know if insurance companies have requested those types of records? Is that data that you would have? Who would have that?
I don't know. I'd have to go ask. Ruben,
Because
do you-
I'm like,
It
either
would-
this problem
Julie,
doesn't
it would
exist.
go to the public disclosure unit if they got a
Okay.
request on, like, even if a parent or anyone can ask records for your guys. I mean, anyone on the streets can do that, not
Right.
just insurance companies. You're asking us in licensing division if we would know that? Probably not, no. Like I said,
Julie-
whenever we go to request for records, Julie, it just goes straight to the public disclosure unit email, and then they deal with it.
Okay,
Julie,
so we would have to request it from them to find out the number of insurance companies that have reached out and asked that.
Yes.
And for all the
Julie,
providers on here, it's mostly the research. So I don't think insurance companies are just doing it in the middle of your policy. It's when you either need a new policy or you're renewing your policy that they're making these that they're making it really difficult. So if you're in the middle of your policy, you're probably fine. It's just getting new or renewing that is problematic at this moment.
Yeah, fine is temporary when
Yeah.
everybody has to renew every year. So, okay, I did want to ask about another one of these. Are we going to go into, I mean, it's kind of nice to be able to ask questions and just get the immediate response, right? So I don't know if people want to go to breakout rooms, I guess we could do that, but then we would have to come back with a list of questions and
Julie, do you mind letting me know how long we have actually?
oh yeah, sure. We have until 11.
Okay, perfect. If everyone is happy just reviewing the documents and then asking questions or providing feedback in the larger group, I think that that's working fine.
Okay, well, I have another question. In here it says, and I think it's the same question and answer on both docs, who can be present when an employee is being interviewed? And it talks about a third party being present. I had a conversation with a director several years ago, and she was going to sit in on her staff being interviewed by some investigator. I don't know what investigator, I don't know which division. And she was told she could not. And so it had to be just like somebody that didn't work for the center or something. And so I'm wondering if that's real or if that's just what she was told. Maybe it'd be nice to know who qualifies as a third party. I know my staff would prefer that I sit there and just listen. I'm not going to intervene. I'm just going to listen. But it doesn't tell me in here if that's allowed.
I'll jump in. And you're gonna hate the answer. It depends, right, Julie? And here's the thing. It depends on if you are involved in the complaint, right? Or the investigation, or so that's why it depends. Sometimes it's fine, other times it's not. The other thing is a third party is somebody that doesn't necessarily have a horse in the race, I guess is one way to say it, right? That they truly are neutral or somebody that, so that's why it depends. So in some situations, yeah, I think that an owner or director could sit in, right? In other situations, they're going to say no because of what they're looking into.
Then Travis, does the employee have the right to say, I want to have an attorney present?
Yes. That's where they can ask for somebody else to be in.
Right, but you're saying it has to be a third party that's not, and what I'm hearing people say is that sometimes it's just you're scared and you want some support.
Yep.
But what I'm hearing you say is if a director can't be that person, then what every provider should be thinking about is who do they have an attorney that they can call to be present at the time of any interview of any employee, so that the employee's rights are protected. Is that what I'm hearing you say? That's the only way to do that?
In some case, I don't know that it necessarily needs to be an attorney, right? It could be that they just want somebody to be there to support them, right? I don't think it necessarily needs to be an attorney though.
So
it
just
could
to
be-
piggyback on this, Susan, so if an alleged subject of a CPS investigation would like to have an attorney present during the CPS interview, they absolutely can request that. Okay. Going back to, and again, I'm just talking about CPS investigations, going back to the directors or owners sitting on the interviews, like Travis said, that's kind of case by case basis. We've had times, not often, but we've had times where directors or owners will coach their staff what to say, or the alleged subject is, will not be transparent and honest during their interviews because the director's involved somehow. So we've had those cases before in the past.
So it could just be one of their coworkers maybe that's not named or involved, or it could be like if you have a center nearby and maybe.
Sure, absolutely, Julie. If they feel more comfortable, for sure.
Okay. Because honestly, somebody's friend or relative is not going to know what they should be listening for. So, okay. So I wonder if there's any way to provide more of an answer there. I mean, to just say, it could be a director or coworker if they're not involved or named in the investigation or something.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that the individual that's sitting in there with the person can't be involved in the investigation, right? So
okay,
in some situations, Julie, that's gonna put you outside of that room is what it's gonna do, because it's your center, right? So there could be an impact there.
Hey, Julie, on a third party sitting in on the subject interview, they will have to sign a confidentiality agreement too, because what's being said in there cannot be shared outside that interview.
Sure, that makes sense. Does anybody else want to jump in with a question about the FAQ docs?
I still think that it needs to say in the CPS one, what happens to someone if the verdict is founded, like what that means for them. It means that they can't work with children anymore, that I think it needs to say that. I think that everybody needs to know what happens if a report is valid or founded when CPS has investigated. That's just my feedback.
Yeah, but it also needs to also let them know their due process. Just because you're founded doesn't mean it ends there too. They have rights for a hearing as well.
Oh, okay. I'm seeing on the second page, it said valid. Licensing finding means that there's a reasonable cause to believe a violation of the WAC occurred. And it sounds like Jamie's saying that that should be expanded upon to say the individual is no longer eligible to work in early learning or something, right?
So valid and not valid. So that is for the licensing complaint inspection. Jamie, were you referring to the founded for the CPS?
Yes.
Okay.
So I had a friend go through this and appealed and got it taken off eventually, but it was going to seriously affect her ability to work with elderly people, to work in childcare, to be a foster parent. I think it's really important that people know their rights if something like this is founded or valid.
Yeah, Jamie, because what all you're saying is true. I mean, if it sticks, you'll come up on a background check and you will not be qualified.
Yeah, and I wouldn't know how to navigate an appeals process. I think that's something that should be shared somewhere.
Hey, Julie, when we do a founded letter on the subject, it outlines exactly what due process is and the first steps that they need to do.
Okay. Thanks for that. Angela?
So we've had a CPS investigation that took way longer than 90 days. And it doesn't talk, and it wasn't because law enforcement was involved. It was adjacent to COVID. However, it was like 5 months. And we paid this person on leave for 5 months to not work. And like what I don't know if that's a common thing that happens or if that was just like an uncommon situation that occurred for us. Because that's the only one we've ever had, but it was a very long time to not know what was going on because there was like very little contact about what was going on. So we couldn't talk, we couldn't support our person very well. We couldn't support our classroom very well. And, and it was just really hard to get a hold of the person who was supposed to be in charge of our investigation. So like when you get stuck in a situation like that, like maybe there could be some information on here, like, I mean, on the very back, it's like, you can call this number, but we were finding that like numbers are hard to contact. Like, is there an email? Like, who's the director of this department? Like more than just like a 1-800 number, because sometimes situations become a little bit harder than what it looks like on this paper.
Yeah, let me address that. So I really try to get these investigations done, especially when law enforcement is not involved. So I have data that I can bring to the next meeting. We in this last year, we're averaging 56 days for investigations statewide. Some regions are better than others, right? But 56 days. So when law enforcement is not involved, we really try to get those done within 45 days. So I have data to back that up. Actually 5 years worth. But yeah, during COVID, it did, at times that impacted timelines. But what you experienced, I hope that it's uncommon. Try to get them done as quickly as possible.
Well, and it does say in the FAQ here that they are permitted to work. Sometimes they would need to be fully supervised by another staff person.
It was in an early Head Start classroom, and so early Head Start would not allow them to work. They had to be on admin leave. So we had a second layer of problem on top of that.
Gotcha. Okay. Janelle?
We did have one on the licensing side, and it took like 117 days. Not that I was counting, of course. And it is hard to get a hold of someone. And because you have this weight on you this whole time, wondering what the devil they're going to say in their report. But it did outline, even though it was unfounded, it did outline, you can still get a hold of them and write a letter, which I did. Because I felt like there was maybe some untruthfulness on the dates. So like when I had email records and phone records of phone calls and say, hey, I called on this date looking for an update. First I called the investigator himself, and like at 45 days, hey, what's going on? Because like you have 45 days, right? Oh, well, we're trying to get it done. This is way after COVID. I'll definitely have it to my supervisor this week. Okay. So I was quiet until day 91. And then I didn't call the investigator back. I called the supervisor, and then she did a bunch of backpedaling and, oh, I'm sure that you should have your letter by now, 117 days. No law enforcement. It was a playground fall. It was pretty cut and dried. I still think there needs to be a fast track where we can just get this stuff done. I know the average, you say, Ruben, is 56 days, but that means there's some way outside of 90.
So was that a CPS investigation or a licensing complaint? Sorry.
Licensing.
Oh, yeah. So CPS, I'm talking about CPS is 56 days for the founded and unfounded.
Licensing is 45. For just a licensing investigation, right? So just not having CPS involved, just a licensing issue should be 45 days. So I'd love to get some more details on that so I can follow up on it.
Yeah, both of these documents say 45 days. Now that you specified, Travis, something about what you said made me wonder, does that mean that, is there any chance that it means that if licensing concludes their portion within 45 days, they can then pass the investigation over to CPS and then they get, okay, no.
Doesn't work. That works the other
What about
way.
the other way around?
Works the other way around.
Oh.
So then we're trying to stay, we work with the investigator at the same time as they're looking at the LDCPS issues. Licensing is also working, but sometimes we have to wait for them to close their complaint to make recommendations to us, and then we pick it up. So that's why you get a little bit of a delay. But you know, if they're running up to the 90 days, we should be right there next to them. It shouldn't then take an additional 45 days. Should not do that. It should be closing right at that same time. It's an extension to the 90 is what it is. They have the 90, we have 45.
Alarming to hear examples of such lengthy ones, though. I do want to mention that we're supposed to be going to break from 11 to 11:30, but we still have hands up. So I'm going to go back to Janelle, and do you have your hand up for a new? Oh, you took it down. Okay. Okay, Gloria, go ahead.
Yes, my question is, when it's an accusation and the accusation is false, I want to talk about family child care because it's different from the centers. The centers, I think they don't close all centers, right? They only maybe close the classroom or remove the staff. And then the family home, they close the home for the time the investigation is around 3 months. And some of those cases, there are false accusations. How is the compensation or the, I'm sorry, this was a mistake, we closed you, we damaged you. How does CYF do to the provider? Because the provider stopped receiving payments and they have bills, they have payments to do, they have expenses, and it's only all that was part of compensation and that's it. I think there has to be something done to take care of this because some families, they feel upset because the provider is charging the copay, the late fee, and they don't like it, and they can go upset and make false accusations. Or for something they didn't like it, they can make false accusations. And the provider is affected in a lot of ways, individually, and the family, and the business, and also the reputation around because it started gossip around and nothing happened until the investigation done. It's like, we're okay. It's something planned and prevention and compensation for these family child care providers for these places where the accusations are false. We have to do something.
You know, I didn't even think of that, Gloria, when I was saying that the FAQ does say that you can have someone work under supervision while the investigations are going on. How does that work for family home? If you've got one provider only,
so
they have to shut down for 45 days?
Typically,
Yeah,
typically they do. Now, again, they have due process, right? So even if you know, we're suspending their license, they still have due process where then they can go in and tell their side of the story. So they do have rights in that situation, but a lot of times in family homes, you're not able to, one, if it's the owner of the facility, the licensee, they have, if they're named, there's nobody else can come into their home and run their facility. In some cases, right, there are situations where we can get an individual out of the home during that time so they can still operate. So we do some sort of safety plan in place. So that's where I would encourage folks to talk to their licensor and figure out how they can navigate through this. But unfortunately, when it comes to family homes and there's allegations of abuse and neglect, typically it is closing those doors. In centers, you have a lot more freedom because you can remove the individual and bring somebody else in. So yeah. And with compensation there, you know, it's kind of the risk of running your own business is that you know, that there isn't compensation after, you know, things come back and say, yeah, you know, here's your license. So unfortunately.
I think there has to be some kind of compensation because it's a devastating situation. I've been having phone call from providers that they were closed because of past occupation. And they don't have any access to emotional support. They don't have any economical access. And because if somebody was upset and made a false accusation, they losing business and they owe money or they have in the situation they can lose the house because 3 months of no payment. And I think it's something has to be done in place or be more like we're going to still you open while we do the accusations and we're going to implement a plan. But I think it's not fair to close them because why a provider is going to risk their license to do something like we can lose everything when we have a difficult time to earn this license and because some parent is upset, we're going to pass through this process. I think we have to think about it. And also, the provider didn't receive, I'm sorry, for all the damage, only they had to call and see if the case is closed or not because it's not open communication. It's not a like some organizational information like somebody has to report like everything is done and they have to go back and work. But I think we have to think about this and we are human and we have to be respected and we have to have consideration and don't put that on the spot and cause this damage. I know you directly, the DCYS directly don't cause the damage, but listen to parents, but we have to something in place and no closing and lack the services for these providers, please. When it's like something was like true, okay, cancel the license, but no like close everyone because somebody was upset and don't want to pay a copay.
Yes, and I think here's what I'll say. If we are going to take licensing action, right, and it gets to that situation, and we need to suspend, especially a family home, we're having that's a serious conversation that we're having, and we're looking at is there anything else that we can do? We're not just suspending and then picking up the pieces. We're doing everything that we can to have conversations to figure out how we can navigate through, but at the end of the day, ultimately, we have to keep kids safe. Sometimes that means that we have to suspend a license, but we take that very serious. We know that, it has a huge ripple effect on folks' income as well as just, displacing kids and then parents are upset. So we know the ripple effect and we take it very serious when we make those decisions. We're not taking them lightly. So it's our last resort a lot of times.
I know that we went over the time and I want to thank Travis and Ruben for jumping in and helping support. But I also just want to say thank you again for these great conversations. There's so many layers to this. And I genuinely really appreciate hearing everyone's perspective. So I just want to say thank you again. I think that there's some details that we can make clearer and some things that we can confirm before these are finalized. So I'm just really appreciative of the collaboration. So thank you guys so much.
So, yeah, and I appreciate the attendance on this topic. I'm wondering if this topic can come back again in June, or will this already be finalized? Can we discuss again?
I think we can certainly discuss again.
Okay. Yeah, I would love to hear how the feedback is incorporated from today in June. June 11th, by the way. And then we are gonna go to break. Yeah, we can come back at 11:30 for our, oh, I want to mention the Menti. It is in the chat. And you can use the Menti for any topic that we've discussed so far. So the STARS training, because we didn't really put up a Menti for that. So use it for any and all topics we've discussed so far, and we'll see you at 11:30. Okay, well, we are ready to move on to the next section. All right. So my co-chair is just running a little late. I'm going to go ahead and introduce. We've got the Help Me Grow developmental screening as our next presentation from Sarah Holdener and Lark Hesterke. I hope that's how I pronounce it.
Yes.
You. All right. Well, thank you for being here, and I'll leave it to you guys, and I'll just monitor the chat.
That's great. And actually, it'll just be me today. Hello, I'm Sarah Holdener. I work at DCYF as the Help Me Grow lead. And just to provide some situational context, I sit in the Partnership Prevention and Services Division at DCYF and the Family and Community Support section. So I sit alongside home visiting and early supports for infants and toddlers, as well as community-based child abuse prevention work. So thank you for having me. I believe this is my first time speaking to an ELAC group, so I'm very excited. My partner in the work, Lark, who works at Within Reach as the Help Me Grow Washington Network Director, has lost her voice and is super sick today, so it'll just be me today, but I hope soon you'll have the opportunity to meet Lark as well. Okay, so I think we have about 30 minutes together, and so this is kind of an overview of how we'll spend our time. I'm going to give a very high-level overview of Help Me Grow, just so that we have some shared understanding and language around Help Me Grow. And then I'll also do a very brief update on a partnership between Help Me Grow and Child Care Aware of Washington. And then finally, the meat of the agenda will be at this part in yellow. It's the developmental screening supports, a project that's working on designing, exploring, designing, building out developmental screening supports for ECE providers. And then finally, we'll have some time at the end for discussion. Okay. So what is Help Me Grow? A simple way to think about it is it's just a way to connect families with young children to what they need. It is a statewide, effort, and it's free. There's no eligibility requirements. So it's a universal approach. Any family can access Help Me Grow. And Help Me Grow connects families to lots of different services and supports, but focuses on what they call their essential service areas. And they've bucketed them into 4 different categories. So one is all about a bunch of services and supports around adult and pediatric health services. One's around food security. Another one is around child development, which is what will be the work that we'll be discussing today falls under. And then there's another category that's called family supports, but this is a lot of the basic needs connections that families often want. And then finally, I also like to think of Help Me Grow as navigational infrastructure that many state agencies over many years have invested in. And so it's this existing infrastructure that families, providers, you can use. And I know infrastructure can be kind of a hard term, right? Because like, what does that mean? And so when I say navigational infrastructure, I'm talking about there's a statewide contact center, right, that has lots of staff there working to talk with families. And also this growing network of coordinated access points. There are also local implementations of Help Me Grow across the state. The infrastructure also includes an early childhood resource directory. It's statewide. And this is a giant resource directory with over 6,000 resources in it. And also a team of 4 full-time employees whose sole job is to keep that resource directory up to date and reliable. So it is a source of much investment and love and hard work from Help Me Grow to maintain that resource directory. It also includes referral relationships across the state and technology, and I'll get into that a little more, as well as the state affiliate. So Within Reach is a nonprofit, and they are the state affiliate for Help Me Grow. Help Me Grow is a national model that's being implemented in 30 states, I believe, at this point. It's a really flexible model, though, so it looks at every implementation of Help Me Grow can really vary and looks really different from state to state. But Within Reach holds that role of state affiliate and works to provide technical assistance to those who are implementing Help Me Grow or connecting with Help Me Grow. Yeah, so that is what Help Me Grow is. And we'll move on to the next slide. Let's also be super clear about what Help Me Grow is not, because it's not the end all and be all, right? So Help Me Grow is not a program with traditional service delivery. Rather, it connects families to existing services and programs. It is also not long-term care coordination. So Help Me Grow works to establish relationships with those entities that can offer long-term care coordination. But Help Me Grow, after having a conversation with a family, will offer several follow-ups to ensure that if there were any barriers, that family could overcome those barriers to reach that desired service or support. And finally, DCYF, or Help Me Grow, is not DCYF owned. Rather, it's a collaborative in our state with a growing system. It's a growing network and a growing system of lots of different partners. And so my role as at DCYF is essentially I'm the government liaison to the Help Me Grow system in our state. And so I spend a lot of time thinking about systems coordination and how can we leverage Help Me Grow and navigational infrastructure to better knit together all of these different efforts to help families access what they need. Okay, we can move on. And then, Julie, will you just let me know if there's any questions that pop up in the chat or, hands raised? And okay, great. Oh, I see a question about funding. Lots of braided funding. Help Me Grow has lots of different government contracts, philanthropy, state proviso funds, so it's a blended approach. Okay, this is the 0.5 slide because I'm not actually really going to go into this slide, but I just wanted to, for the group to be aware that Help Me Grow underwent a pretty robust strategic planning process last year. And so we're much clearer now on where we're headed over the next 5 years, what we do, who we work with. And this slide deck, I'm assuming, will be sent out to you, so you can definitely spend your time reading through it. But at the top, you'll see the purpose statement. You'll see, we define and articulate what we do and who we work with. And if you had to take away one thing from this slide, I think it would be that as a systems model, it helps me to think of Help Me Grow as like a prism, right? And if you think of a prism, there's lots of different faces. Well, same with Help Me Grow, there's lots of different faces of the work. And so, yes, there is a face that is family facing, right? Direct service facing. But then the other faces are all about what is that work that has to happen behind the scenes to make that interaction with the family successful. So that's a lot of systems coordination. It's a lot of working with communities, working with partners and funders. So that's what we mean by a systems model. And then at the bottom of the graphic, you'll see a row of colorful circles. And that's essentially our strategic plan summarized into key activities. And today we'll be focusing on that blue one today called specialized referral pathways. Okay, next slide.
Can you define young children as your organization defines it?
Yeah, it's prenatal to 8, essentially. Okay, so I totally recognize specialized referral pathways as a jargony term. And so I'm going to define it a little, but essentially we know that access looks different for different people. We understand that most people are not going to pick up a phone these days and call a 1-800 hotline number. And that people have trusted messengers in their life, people they go to when they need support. And so Help Me Grow is taking an approach of essentially trying to build tailored connections to populations of focus. So I just to provide some tangible examples here. So for instance, Help Me Grow has built relationships with all the birthing hospitals in Washington State. And so that when a child or a baby, an infant is born with substance exposure, that family can be routed to voluntary community supports. And that work is called the Plan of Safe Care. So that's one example of a specialized referral pathway. Another one is there's a relationship between Help Me Grow and all of the TANF or all of the DSHS community service offices. And so when a TANF recipient has a young child, those families are also directly connected to Help Me Grow. So it's kind of these specialized connections that really takes the burden off of the family to have an opportunity to get access to services and supports. Okay, next slide. So this is an example of a specialized pathway. And it also is an example of trying to leverage this navigational infrastructure to, like, again, weave together systems. So this is a project that's been happening over the last year that's been funded through the Preschool Development Grant. And essentially, we were aware that, we have these two big systems in our state, Child Care Aware of Washington and Help Me Grow Washington, who are serving the same population, but in really different ways, right? Child Care Aware specializes in childcare and subsidy work, among other items. And then Help Me Grow really focuses on social and health services and social supports and basic needs and child development. So, like, how could we... So this project brought Child Care Aware and Help Me Grow to the table to really kind of asset map and say, where are our strengths, where are our differences, where does it make sense to connect? And it funded a pilot that tested lots of different ways to do warm referrals between the two systems. And so our ultimate deliverable is an implementation roadmap, which outlines, what did we learn through this partnership and this pilot? What next steps, what are the next steps? And then what is the financial investment to really build out now what we've learned? And so this work will be incorporated into our next ask for preschool development grant dollars. But more than anything, it's just been a great experience because now these two teams really know each other and have a relationship. And this process is going to be we're looking at it as a template to replicate with other system partners as well. So we have, Help Me Grow would love to have systems coordination with Perinatal Support of Washington or Parent Trust or the Family Resource Center Network. And so this process has been really helpful in us to understand, how does that come to be? Okay, next slide. Okay, so this is this is actually why I'm here today. I just wanted to give you a little background before we dove in. So I wanted to talk to you about a project that's intending to explore, design, and build out some developmental screening supports for ECE providers across the state. So developmental screening is a mounting priority in Washington, and I'll go into that in a little bit later. But and we know that the number of ECE providers being trained on developmental screening and pursuing program-wide implementation is increasing. So yay, that's great. We also know that in-house or on-site coordination is a sustainable option for many providers and settings. However, for those providers where capacity may be limited, developmental screening and follow-up might be difficult to prioritize. And so we are using child care development funds to leverage Help Me Grow Washington's really robust infrastructure around developmental screening and navigation, with the goal of supporting providers to become developmental screening hubs. And so and thinking about this work, of course, we want it to be provider driven, but we have some initial ideas of what we mean by tiered developmental screening supports. So for instance, for those providers who, are already doing screening and doing all the necessary follow-up and whatnot, maybe all they need from Help Me Grow is free access to an online ASQ account. Maybe that's what they need. Or maybe it's that they need like the resource directory, just an easy way to search for supports for the children and the families that they work with. A medium level support might be that a provider wants to do the screen alongside the parent, but really doesn't have capacity to do the follow-up, right? So the follow-up, not only for if there's any sort of developmental concern to like early supports for infants and toddlers, but is there anything else that family might need? You know, so that can take a lot of time. And so perhaps that family wants to work, that provider wants to work with Help Me Grow to do the follow-up piece. A high-end kind of support might be that a provider just wants Help Me Grow to work with the family to do the screen and the follow-up, and then Help Me Grow would link back to the provider to let them know, you know, what happened. These are all very exploratory ideas. We don't know if this is actually what providers want. So we'll be doing a lot of listening and learning over the next year to build what providers are saying is actually going to be useful for them. This is a new project we just kicked off. The contracts were signed in December, and so this work really began just in January. And the project team has really taken a lot of time to listen, to learn the landscape. There's a lot of parallel work happening in this space, and so we want to come in and really supplement and not duplicate efforts that are underway. And then we'll also be talking about some of the iterative testing that we'll be doing soon. Okay, I wanted to zoom out for a minute and talk about why developmental screening. And so when I think about the benefits of developmental screening, I think about the benefits on a child level, on a provider level, on a programmatic level, and on a state level. And so I've outlined those here on your screen for that. Right, you all work with kiddos, like kids come in with different needs, right? So and developmental screening doesn't just identify any delays, but it essentially establishes a baseline to tell us like how is that kiddo doing in their developmental and their development. And so we can celebrate their strengths knowing that, and we can also act early when they need extra support. So it's a really important tool for children and their families. It's also meant or can be used as a support for providers. Because kids have different needs, like the developmental screen is a tool and a resource for providers to think through how to best support that kid and help them identify what kind of activities will really support that child in their development. On the programmatic level, developmental screening directly supports early achievers, quality standards around child outcomes. And finally, it also supports DCYF's goal around kindergarten readiness. Right? We all know that learning doesn't start at the age of 5. And so given that, we really need to focus on the different needs of every child. And that's why screening is so important, because even though there might be 2 children who are the same age, that doesn't mean that they're in the same developmental stage. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so talking about iterative testing, we are doing our first pilot coming up in May. And so the first pilot is really focusing in on the ASQ online enterprise account. So Help Me Grow Washington has this and is offering this free of charge to providers. And so this is a small scale pilot, but what we're hoping to learn is like, did it work? Like how successful was that offering of that tool to support infants and toddlers, particularly those who are low income, to access developmental screening and follow-up support? Did the providers like it? Was that a useful, valuable tool for them? What value did they get out of the pilot? Was it difficult for them? Like what burdens did they face, or was it easy? Right? So we have a lot of learning to do around the provider's experience as well. And then we also want to understand how successful were we in centering equity. We want to know, what were the demographics of the children screened? What strategies were successful that we were employing to support families and staff whose primary language is not English? Who wasn't included in this pilot that would need to be included in future pilots to really understand all that? So at this point, we have 10 providers who will be participating. They are being compensated for their time and efforts. But more importantly, this is iterative testing, so there will be more pilots coming where we continue to build upon what we learn. Okay, and then the next, we are also doing kind of a broad statewide survey in May. And this is a survey that will be available in English, Spanish, Somali. And it's got different purposes. One purpose is to help us better understand what is that demand among providers for this free online access to the ASQ. We also want to get away from the ASQ and say, well, what other supports are needed to engage in developmental screening? And then we also ask, hey, if you're interested and have capacity to participate in future pilots, put your information here. So it'll help us kind of create a directory of people who might want to participate in the work. And this survey, the first 150 respondents will receive compensation. Okay. So I'm going to stop talking and first ask, are there any questions that are coming up for you around this project?
Yeah, I have two questions. First off, I'm wondering, how did you recruit providers for your initial pilot? And secondly, I think providers are using a lot of different developmental screening tools currently, and I'm hoping that this isn't something that's going to become required for everyone. Some folks like the tool that they're using. Sometimes we're told things are voluntary and then it becomes mandatory later. So those are my questions.
Love it. Thank you, Julie. I'll answer your latter question first. Yes, I understand that there's the SWIC, there's lots of other tools, and the ASQ is not a perfect tool either. And so we are starting with the ASQ with intention to move on to other tools as we continue our learning. I'll also say that we're in close connection with Best Starts for Kids in King County, because they've kind of really led the work around trying to adapt the ASQ into different languages, developing, adapting so that it's culturally relevant. So we're hoping to learn from people that have gone before us around the tools that we support. It is voluntary. That's all I have to say at this point. It is voluntary, and we have no plans to make it mandatory. And then your first question was around recruitment. We've been working closely with DCYF and the Early Learning Division around this project, particularly with the B3QI initiative. And so just leaning on DCYF's early learning team for guidance. And we created a recruitment flyer that got sent out across, I think through, sorry, this is more of a LARC area, but I believe it was through different, like through the B3QI program manager. And because of the timing of the pilot, we needed to find centers who were already doing the ASQ on paper. Because we had a short time to prepare and didn't feel we would have enough time to orient a new program to like the concept of developmental screening and how to do it. So those were some of our constraints with the pilot recruitment.
Okay, I'm sorry, you keep saying letters that start with a B. What is that?
Thank you. The Birth to 3 Quality Initiative.
Thank you so much. Dave, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, just wondering, one of the things that I think that we've realized families struggle with sometimes is just navigating through the Washington Connection website to be able to get access to subsidized care among other services. Will that be integrated in this work at all?
It's a good question. I don't think it will be in any first iterations of this work. In the other project where we were coordinating with Child Care Aware and Help Me Grow Systems Connection, I feel that exploration is going to continue, and I feel like that's been brought up, but no real solutions have been identified yet. Nicole, did you want to say something?
Sounds good.
I was going to say, Sarah, can I jump in there for a second?
Yeah.
Thank you. So Dave, on Washington Connections, one that is a system and website that's owned by DSHS. And so and we jointly work with them. But Childcare Aware, our family resource center, they are actually, I believe, an assister agency. And part of what that means is that they can actually help families navigate some of that. So just know that if someone's calling into the Family Resource Center, that they have the ability to do that. And actually DSHS, and I know we've talked with others about this as well, just as we think about access to childcare and access to those benefits, we would love, you know, to have more agencies, if that's something they're interested in doing. I'm happy to set up some time to talk with you about what that could potentially look like. But there are a lot of community agencies that try to help through that navigation. And I know that there's interest about how do we make sort of eligibility to all of our public benefits in Washington State a bit user friendly. And there's some larger work going on around that. So thanks for raising that.
Awesome. No, thank you, Nicole. Thank you both. Appreciate it.
Okay, Gloria, your hand's been up a long time. I think you forgot to put it down earlier. I'm gonna go to Hoden. You wanna unmute?
Yep. Hi. Yeah. I have so Sarah, I have already been trained around the ASQ tools with the Best for Kids. I've done it with my previous organization I was working with. So, and we were doing it in different languages as well. So now that I'm a provider, home provider, and I know it's optional, is there the screening tool, the developmental screening tools, is this also available for home providers to use it as well?
Yes.
And where can I get that?
Well, that's the intention, I guess I should say, right? We're still in the very early beginning parts of this, but we intend to offer this to the array of providers, licensed, FFN, you know, early achievers, like all of those, all providers across the state. This would be eventually a tool that they could access if wanted.
Janelle, I see your hand up.
And first off, I'm going to put my hand down right now so it doesn't stay up again. I am actually part of this initial 10 in the pilot. So, you know, there are 2 family providers, 1 play and learn program, and 7 centers that are represented. So they kind of tried to get a representative idea of the state. We're all over the state. We're just in the very early stages of this. Like I just met Lark and Jeremy on a Zoom last week, and like my training is next week, and then it's like a 6-week pilot or something like that. It's very quick. And I was actually recruited through my Birth to 3 person in this area that did my ASQ training a year ago. So I think they probably just reached out to those people and said, who do you know that has this training that's actually doing these? And who can we grab for this pilot? So it was a really quick turnaround from when she emailed me, hey, do you want to be a part of this, to my phone call and orientation with them. It was very quick rolling.
Thank you, Janelle.
Yeah.
And I believe 2 of the 10 are Spanish speaking. And so we're excited to have those on board too.
So when you recruit for future rounds, will it need to be providers that are already using the ASQ?
I don't think we quite know yet what the next round is. It's like what next part we're going to be like really digging into and testing. But this is something, one question I have for you all is like, what are some of those existing communication channels that we can use and for future pilots so that more people get the word out or are aware of the opportunities? Okay. Feel free to keep asking questions. But I also have some questions for you. I'm just checking my time. Are we okay to go, Julie, for a couple minutes?
Just a couple of minutes, and then we need to move on to the next agenda.
Okay.
Oh, thanks. Go ahead.
Okay. I guess one question I have is, how would this group like to be informed of project updates? Is this something where written communication would do every quarter, or would you prefer me to come back in a while and provide an update, or is there some other method?
What is your timeline on other feedback opportunities or an end date when your project is finalized and not needing more feedback?
This is ongoing in nature, and so our first learning, we'll know more by end of June, kind of what was learned from that first pilot and what next steps might look like.
Okay. Well, I think a written update would be good for our June meeting, and then we can go from there.
That's great. Okay. And then also if the group, as I asked before, has any communication channels, we are connected with DCYF's Early Learning newsletter, which is a great resource. But if there are other channels that providers, particularly those maybe who are not English speaking, are using, or that are more homegrown, we'd be open to leveraging those as well.
Well, I mean, if you're looking for non-English speaking communities, I think going through the Union or Imagine might get you where you need to be.
Okay. Thanks, Julie.
Will you be partnering with ECAP or Early Head Start as well?
That's the intention, but I'm not quite sure exactly. I don't think we've sussed out exactly like when that will happen, and what iteration of testing. But yes, that is the goal.
Sorry, I had to step away, so I didn't get to hear everything.
Sorry for the noise in the background, but I think we're ready to move on.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for being here. And we're going to move on to end of session update and next biennium planning with Melissa Cheeseman and Nicole Rose. So if you guys want to take over.
Magandang hapang or good afternoon. Thank you very much, Julie, for introductions. Again, my name is Melissa Cheeseman, Early Learning Senior Policy Advisor within Government Affairs at DCYF. Today, I'm here with Nicole Rose, Assistant Secretary of Early Learning, again, for the Early Learning Division. It's great to see everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. Our intention and hope is that these legislative updates are meaningful and provide an opportunity to connect and discuss. During the presentation, please feel free to lift your hand at any time, leave a comment in the chat with any questions, thoughts, concerns, comments. As it relates to questions, if there is something that Nicole and I cannot answer, we will provide a response after today's meeting. Next slide, please. Oh, I see it up, never mind. So the agenda. Oh no, please go back one. So today's agenda will include two components. Just like Julie mentioned, the first part of this will be the end of session update, which will include bills that are now session law and related early learning supplemental budget items. Next, Nicole will be presenting information on DCYF's decision packages / agency request timeline, as well as Early Learning Division's proposed decision package concepts for the next biennium. There are two dedicated slides in this deck for Q&A, one at the end of this session update and one at the end of Nicole's decision package concept presentation. Again, those are just another way to make sure that we're interacting, collecting comments, collecting questions, having discussions where you all want more information, and just to be able to hold space for that as well. So just wanted to put that out there. Next slide, please. All right, so preparing for session, supplemental budget year. So all of you, this slide should be very familiar. It is the slide that provides a timeline overview of DCYF's legislative annual cycle. The cycle includes an overview of the regular legislative session, as well as implementing legislation, planning decision packages for legislation. If I can direct everybody's attention to the far right of that screen, there's a yellow box next adjacent to the purple timeline. This is communicating where we are currently in the process, the legislative process. So to recap, the legislative session concluded end of business March 7th, 2024. We're now just over a month past the end of that 60-day supplemental regular session. We now know which bills are, have passed and are now law, particularly in the early learning field space, as well as supplemental budgets for operating capital and transportation. Also, DCYF government affairs team members, people like myself, have worked through the budgets and bills to better understand the impacts to DCYF and communicate those findings to program staff like the Early Learning Division. We are guiding and advising on implementation planning processes throughout DCYF currently. Also, what's happening at the same time is program staff are developing implementation plans for those related bills and provisos. Additionally, DCYF program staff is also developing decision packages, like we mentioned before, and agency request concepts for leadership consideration for the next biennium. Next slide, please. Again, this is also a very familiar slide for everybody because it's always important to talk about, take a moment and talk about realities, because realities really do shape what gets included in the budget, as well as what's considered by the legislature when moving bills forward. Realities also lead us to and through the legislative process. For this slide, I'm just going to provide some brief realities related to 2024 session. So as a quick reminder, our state operates on a biennium. The 2024 session is an even supplemental year that augments the biennium 2-year budget, which was enacted in 2023. On odd years, like next year and the previous year, the legislative regular session is long, lasting 105 days. On even years like this year, only lasting 60. So the supplemental budget is intended to modify and update the biennium budget, essentially tweaks to the biennium budget for updated information that impacts funding needs. The supplemental year is not intended to establish big, new, and bold program requests or initiatives. The supplemental budget year intention is that legislation is fast and provides edits. And what we experienced this last leg session is very much felt like an actual supplemental year or supplemental session as compared to maybe during supplemental session during COVID, where there was additional funding available. That's not the reality anymore. This guided DCYF, this guidance comes to DCYF from the governor's office and OFM, the Office of Financial Management, and this shaped DCYF's supplemental requests. In the next session, 2025, again, it's the budget session. This is when, it's a long session lasting 105 days. And it's the session where the 2025-27 biennium budget will be developed. Now, this is when big asks will be considered, essentially mapping out the state spending for fiscal years 25 through 27. There's one other reality I want to mention is the budget operates using a fiscal years. What does that mean? It means that unlike a calendar year that starts on January 1st and ends on December 31st, the fiscal year can start at any point in a year so long as it starts and ends at the same time every year. Like a calendar year, it's also a 12-month period. Washington State operates on a fiscal year starting July 1st and ending June 30th of the following year, and that following year is the year of the fiscal year. So funding for 2024 would be July 1st, 2023, ending June 30th, 2024. Why is this important? It's because funding provided in the budget is based on the state's fiscal year and will aid in understanding when specific funding is available when reviewing the budget. As far as realities, economic realities, DCYF's budget staff provided, I thought, a very useful information at the March 20th webinar on the state's economic revenue forecast council's revenue projections. I'm going to go ahead and drop in the chat the government affairs website. Again, webinars are going to be close to the bottom of this of the website, and the recording as well as the slide deck is there and available. Next slide, please. All right, so this is the update for the end of 2024 legislative session. Next, I'm going to present legislation related to early learning bills and budgets. I'm also going to drop in the chat right now all the reports currently and data that's related to the enacted versions of the operating and capital, or I should say omnibus operating capital and transportation budgets are now available on the LEAP's website. And I've just dropped that in the chat. There's interactive tools there that you can kind of peruse through. But please note that there are the comments for budget items and projects are not yet available. And what I'm being told by OFM is that they will be added later. And I see that we're on the bill slide now, so I don't have to say next slide, please. So these bills that you're looking at now are officially session law, and no parts of these have any type of veto. So starting with Substitute House Bill 1916. This was DCYF's only agency request for legislation during the 2024 session. The bill is a technical fix to ensure early support for infants and toddlers, or ESIT, statute better aligns with program reality. Current law is complex and limits DCYF and local ESIT provider agencies from counting eligible children for the full number of months that they receive service. This agency request for legislation essentially changes the ESIT's monthly count date to the last business day of the month and provides clarifying language that cures current ambiguity in the billing for mid-month and entry and exits for services. So 1916 becomes effective June 6, 2024. The next one is Substitute House Bill 1945. This adds income eligibility for assistance units receiving and eligible for federal or state food assistance for Working Connections childcare, ECAP, and early ECAP programs. It's important to note, though, that depending on which program we're talking about has different effective dates. So for Working Connections childcare and early ECAP, those changes become effective November 1st, 2024. For the ECAP changes specifically related to defining an eligible child, that section becomes effective August 1st, 2030. And then there's a couple of other provisions related to ECAP that includes this as income eligible, but only for the ECAP program if there are available slots. And that would become effective June 6, 2024. The next bill is House Bill 2111. This bill reorganizes several existing portions of Working Connections childcare statute for clarity. This bill does not propose any changes to Working Connections eligibility or requirements, but it does repeal expired provisions related to unemployment compensation for temporary benefit increases, as well as a 2011 report and assessment. 2111 becomes effective June 6, 2024. The next one on the list is Second Substitute House Bill 2124. This expands Working Connections childcare approved activities to include participation in early ECAP and early Head Start. This also expands Working Connections childcare eligibility to include employment in ECAP, early ECAP programs, as well as Head Start and early Head Start programs, so long as the applicant's household's income is still eligible, which is at or below 85% of the state median income. This also modifies the application of the inflationary rate adjustment for the dual language enhancement rate, essentially requiring every 2 years, the dual language enhancement rate be increased for inflation, regardless if the amounts have been appropriated for that purpose. These changes all become effective November 1st, 2024. Next is Substitute Senate Bill 5774. This requires DCYF to provide fingerprinting services at early learning and child welfare offices throughout the state. The funding provided is based on the underlying fiscal assumption of rolling out the required 0.5 or half full-time employee equivalent for each of 7 offices. And the location of those 7 offices needs to be based on prioritizing areas that lack convenient access for fingerprinting services. This bill is effective immediately. And then last but not least, Substitute House Bill 2195. removes early learning facilities or ELF award limits for pre-design, pre-development, major construction, and purchases of early learning facilities and minor renovations. It also provides translation services as an added activity allowable as an administrative cost. And there's an added provision to prioritize construction, renovation, and repair grants for those projects ready for construction. All three of those provisions become effective July 1st, 2025. This bill also allows ELF facilities to be co-located with housing developments to receive state funding for 90% of the project costs, regardless of match, and another provision that no longer requires Commerce to develop rules. Both of those provisions become effective June 6th, 2024. Next slide, please. Oh, no, Julie, I see your hand up. Sorry.
No, I was cool. Wait until the end, but I was wondering about the fingerprint availability within DCYF offices. Does anybody here know what days and times those appointments will be available? Is it just regular business hours?
I'm not sure anybody on that implementation team is here. While I am presenting that this bill specifically in the early learning, because like child welfare, it affects these services that are provided by DCYF2 providers. I don't know if there's anybody on the implementation team here currently.
I don't think there is, Melissa, and I know that Chris Parvin and Ruben and Natalie and others across our agency, Julie, were looking at that because it is about some of our having this available in some of our child welfare offices. So we can take that as a follow-up to let you know sort of where we're at in the planning.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Questions before moving on? All right. Okay, so engrossed second substitute Senate Bill 6109. This is the last bill that I'll be covering today. I want to just point everyone's attention to what's highlighted in blue because that is the portion of the bill that really does impact early learning and childcare. But I mean, to a lesser extent, there is the home visiting contracted slot as well. But I'll cruise through all of these things at a high level, but first just talking about the contracted slots. So as it relates to early learning, section 201 in this bill, or 6109, adds a new section to RCW 43216, which is the underlining statute, establishing a pilot program for contracted childcare slots for infants receiving child protective services. All the provisions of 6109 become effective June 6, 2024. And then specifically with 6109, I just wanted to really quickly kind of just go over the actual statute language, or not go over, just provide the statute language to provide a little bit more clarity into what is being asked here. So this is to establish a pilot program for contracted childcare slots for infants and children in child protective services in locales with historically highest rates of child welfare screening intake due to the exposure or presence of high potency synthetic opioids in the home. There's also an optional use for these contracted slots. For any unused contracted slots may be used for children who are screened in due to a parent's substance use disorder other than for high potency synthetic opioids. The remaining of these provisions, essentially, the first one that you'll see at the top, the public health nurse, this provides funding for a pilot to support caseworkers in engaging and communicating with child welfare involved families about the risks of fentanyl. There's also funding to establish a pilot program for the third-party safety plan participants, as well as funding to set up targeted contracts with existing home visiting programs in 4 locales with historically highest rates of child welfare screen-in intakes targeted to families, again, experiencing high potency synthetic opioid related substance disorder. There's also funding for 2 pilot programs to implement an evidence-based, comprehensive, intensive in-home parenting service support model, and funding for legal liaison in each one of DCYF's regions to work with the department and the Attorney General's office for assisting in preparing for child neglect and abuse court cases. Next slide, please. So this is going to be the part of my presentation where we dive into early learning from the budgets. And so the operating and capital budgets are now session law. The governor did veto parts of the operating budget. However, none of those include impact early learning or childcare. And I want to go ahead and drop the veto letter in the chat since I provided the links to the operating and capital budget. And I also want to say that we don't have, DCYF doesn't have transportation budget items. So, when I cruised through that, I also didn't find anything that impacted early learning and childcare. So before I move on, I just want to mention a few things here before we dive into the changes into rates, because they are directly in alignment, or they're directly related to DCYF's asks, right? So specific to early learning, DCYF put forward and will continue to put forward ambitious requests in the early learning and childcare space. We believe our requests are critical investments, and it was a tough budget year, and we did see a fair amount of our requests not get fully funded or funded at all. If you want more information on DCYF's decision packages and agency requests for legislation, you can also go again to a government affairs website. I want to say about halfway down the page, you will find for 2024 as well as past years decision package information. So now kind of shifting back to the rate adjustments for non-standard hours rates, DCYF's ask here was making our way towards supporting providers through compensatory rates, which would lead hopefully to more capacity. This was only partially funded in the budget. The increased funding included approximately $778,000, which allows DCYF to increase the non-standard hour rate from $135 to $150. This becomes effective July 1st, 2024. For the infant rate enhancement, this was also this is also a DCYF ask, and it's also about making our way towards supporting providers through compensatory rates. I see your hand up, Jacqueline.
Sí, ¿sí se escucha? Una pregunta, en donde están el incremento en horas no estándares de 135 a 150, yo quiero preguntar, muchas proveedoras solamente trabajan de lunes a viernes porque las que trabajamos los fines de semana, para poder calificar para ese bono o de horas no estándares, los niños tienen que tener un número de 30 horas. O sea, yo nunca puedo calificar para ese bono, porque a veces los papás son 28 horas, son 24 horas. Entonces, ¿qué es lo que pasa para las proveedoras que trabajamos los fines de semana y que no podemos alcanzar ese bono porque justo no se completan las 30 horas? Yo quisiera hacer la petición que se diera el bono solamente por trabajar en horas no estándares, que no se requiera de un número de horas trabajadas de los niños. O sea, una hora trabajada de los padres. O sea, si van los fines de semana, ese bono se da a la proveedora. No necesariamente tiene que contar con el número de horas, porque a mí me parece injusto que solamente alcance 28 horas, 24 horas y que yo no lo reciba, siendo que soy una proveedora que trabajo horas no estándares, que son los fines de semana.
So I have the question down, Melissa. Okay, there was talk about the bonus. There's like an increase or a bonus, something to do with the 30 hours. Jacqueline, the provider, is just saying that what happens if we can't reach the 30 hours? What if we don't meet that 30 hours because we work non-standard hours? The bonus shouldn't be tied to hours worked. And if there's any possibility to change that, that would be great. And that was the question and comment.
Melissa,
Oh,
do you want me to take that one, Melissa?
oh yeah, go ahead. I was just going to drop in the chat where Jacqueline is getting that from, specifically WAC 110150249. But yes, please.
Yeah, so this change, so thank you for the question. And this change, oh, it looks like our interpreter is still here as well.
Yeah, I think they're in a different room. So when you speak,
okay,
Jacqueline will be able to hear it in Spanish. Yeah, so keep talking.
So this change is only about the amount of dollars paid once you reach that 30-hour threshold. It does not change the number of hours in order to get to the non-standard hours bonus. That would require additional changes and additional funding. So this change is just about within the existing rule. We will increase the non-standard hour rate from $135 to $150.
Can I just ask a clarifying question on that? As a person that doesn't do the non-standard hours, are you saying, Nicole, that if somebody, let's say a home provider takes on a child that only needs care on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, that's only gonna amount to, say, 25 hours. There's no non-standard hour rate for that. Is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying is you have to meet the 30-hour, my understanding is you have to meet the 30-hour threshold. So if you are at 25 hours or 20 hours, you haven't met that threshold.
Got it. Thank you.
Sí, correcto, yo lo entiendo, pero lo que yo traigo a explicación es que si los fines de semana se trabaja, entonces las proveedoras que trabajamos los fines de semana para ver si se puede alcanzar ese bono de horas no estándares, tampoco podemos llegar a las 30 horas. Entonces, muchas proveedoras están haciendo sus cuidados solamente de lunes a viernes porque al fin y al cabo no se alcanzan a obtener ese bono no estándar. Entonces, ¿qué es lo que pasa? Muchas familias necesitan esos días que son los sábados, los domingos, para ellos trabajar. Entonces, las que nos permanecemos con esos horarios, nos quedamos sin el bono de las horas no estándares porque pues no se alcanzan las 30 horas. A mí no me parece justo que yo trabajo los fines de semana.
What would somebody have to do to put in a rule change or something, Nicole?
So because this is it costs money, it's more than just doing a rule change. We would actually need to be able to get funding from the legislature to do this. And one of the things I'll just say in all transparency is that there is a lot of conversation about this topic, again, in particular, this last legislative session. And we had requests to look at, like, were there some things we could do, like, let's say maybe you provided non-standard hour care, and I'm just using these as examples, right? Like between 0 and 15 hours, would there be like a lower threshold, and then 16 or a lower bonus amount, and then maybe 16 to 30 hours was a higher bonus amount. So we did have questions around that, but this increase to sort of existing rule is what was funded by the legislature.
Okay, thanks for that answer.
Gracias.
Back to you, Melissa. You're muted.
Thank you. All right. So again, back to the infant rate enhancement. This was also part of DCYF's request as far as trying to support providers through compensatory rates. This was only partially funded. We got an increase of approximately 2.6 million, which allows DCYF to increase the infant enhancement rate from $90 to $300. And this becomes effective also January 1st, 2024. All right, so ECAP entitlement, this is the last rate increase. This is also another DCYF request in making our way towards ECAP entitlement in a way that supports families and providers in offering high quality early learning opportunities. So last session, DCYF requested a 40% ECAP rate increase and received approximately 20% of that request, or about 20% increase. So this year, DCYF's request is about making our way all the way there. To ECAP entitlement was only partially funded. So the increase that we received here is approximately 3.8 million, which allows DCYF to increase full day ECAP slots by 5% and extended day ECAP slots by 9%. Next slide, please.
I have a question on that last slide.
Mm-hmm.
Both of the last two, infant enhancement and ECAP rate you just read as 3.8 and infant enhancement you said as 2.6. Are you just flipping the numbers on accident, or are they wrong on the slide?
The slide is correct. Sometimes I have high functioning what's the word I'm looking for? Dyslexia. And so the way that my brain sometimes operates is I do flip things around, but thank you.
That's okay.
It is 6.2 million.
Okay.
And I do sometimes say things like wham-bagging also instead of bandwagon. So I appreciate everyone's patience. And yes, no, the slide is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Apologies.
I'm on the same boat as you, so I just want to make sure I'm hearing correctly what I'm
100. I totally get it. 100. All right. So this is a list of other early learning investments that received additional or new funding in the budget for specifically to DCYF. And so the first one is on professional development or related to the relationship-based professional development. There's an additional 2.5 million for expanding and supporting childcare providers to establish new, affordable, high-quality childcare and early learning programs. The next one is coordinated recruitment and enrollment. This funding request is in direct response to our request for additional funding to meet the requirements of transition to kindergarten program legislation passed last year in 2023. This was fully funded. This is an ask from DCYF that is completely funded at approximately 1.4 million. And this funding is specifically related to coordinated recruitment and enrollment for DCYF and OSPI to support coordination and connections between early learning programs on the ground in local communities. The next one is also something that DCYF currently provides as the infant and early childhood mental health consultations. There's an additional 1.75 million that's provided in funding with a requirement that $150,000 of that additional funding be used specifically to support rural school districts and rural communities with consultation needs. And then this next one, this is a new program. So this is the Spokane Child Care Workforce and Capacity Pilot. This pilot program focus is to increase the childcare workforce and childcare capacity in the greater Spokane area. It also requires contracting with a nonprofit organization for implementation and reporting on the pilot program. And then that report is due June 30th, 2025. The next one is is also new. This is Snohomish County Early Learning Planning Coalition. This work focuses on identifying and reporting ways to strengthen Snohomish County early learning community. This requires contracting with Snohomish County Early Learning Coalition to create a leadership team. And then that leadership team must submit a report that identifies the highest priority needs and common challenges within the early learning community, as well as strategies to address those challenges, a list of partners to help with the implementation, and a funding plan for all these recommendations, as well as goals for implementation. That report is due to the governor's office and the legislature also by June 30th, 2025. And then there's one other new service or contract that's in this early learning budget, and this is the Inclusion Mentorship Program. So this requires contracting with a nonprofit organization that implements an inclusion mentorship program. So the program must provide early learning providers with needed skills and knowledge to effectively care for and educate children with disabilities, developmental delays, and challenging behavioral needs. And then finally, the Imagination Library received additional $500,000 in funding. Next slide, please. So on this slide, you're going to find additional investments in early learning, directly or indirectly, for other agencies in the budget, the operating budget specifically. And so the first one is essential workers analysis. So approximately $250,000 is provided to the Office of Insurance Commissioner to conduct a feasibility study on expanding essential worker to include childcare workers in addition to other professions. The next one is early learning scholars. Approximately $801,000 is provided to the State Board of Community and Technical Colleges to assist community college staff to recruit, advise, and support early achiever scholars completing their early childhood qualifications. And then also OSPI coordination received about $150,000 of additional funding to provide for staffing and administrative costs necessary to provide interdepartmental coordination and engagement with interested persons with respect to the transition to kindergarten legislation. Next slide, please. And then this is my last slide before the Q&A. So these, again, we're still talking about other investments in early learning at other agencies, but specific to this slide, it's all commerce. So the first two items are from the capital budget. So the early learning facilities, or ELF, competitive grants. The capital budget provides an additional $4.5 million to fund competitive grants, and then an additional $2.3 million, yes, for the minor renovation grants. And then finally, I think I mentioned this earlier on, the operating budget requires Commerce to implement a construction on-site, near-site childcare facilities pilot program to serve children of construction workers. The pilot must be administered as a competitive grant program. Of the $325,000 that's provided in the funding, $300,000 of that is specifically for grants and for the creation and implementation of the pilot sites. The remaining $25,000 is for contracting with a nonprofit organization to provide technical assistance to grant awardees and to provide status updates and reports to Commerce. Commerce must report on the results of this pilot program by June 30th, 2025 to the Office of the Governor, or to the Governor's Office and the Legislature. Next slide, please. So before moving on to the next part of the presentation, I just wanted to pause for a minute where, if, for any questions, thoughts, concerns, any additional information you might want about anything I presented today.
I have a question. Your slide that talked about Snohomish County getting funding, did that have anything to do with Everett College trying to close their childcare center in 22?
I mean, I can't directly, I mean, I don't have any background information as to the causation of why this new report or study. I do know that the leadership team, right, is a group of members that should include business community and industry representatives, childcare directors and owners, school district superintendents, children's commission, early learning nonprofit executive directors, tribes located in Snohomish County, council members from cities located in Snohomish County, law enforcement, communities of color, coalition, and immigrant communities. I know that like I said, the real purpose of this is to really get an understanding of what the high priority needs for early learning and some of the common challenges for early learning within Snohomish County.
Okay. And then the slide that's talked about the state board getting funding for community and technical colleges for ECE classes. Is that only just to get students into the classes, or does that have anything to do with funding for instructors for when they get students into classes?
So my interpretation of this, and let me pull it up real quickly, because I don't want to just talk out the side of my neck.
Melissa, I'm happy to share.
Oh, yes,
I
please.
know about this one. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Nicole.
Absolutely. It's good to have a team, good to tag team.
Yes.
Angela, on this one, part of what it does is it helps fund the point of contacts that are helping as students sort of navigate into getting into and accessing the variety of funding streams that they can access, including the Early Achievers Opportunity Grants. So it's some direct funding to State Board of Community and Technical Colleges to do that. Right now, some of that funding comes from DCYF to State Board, to some direct funding to support those point of contacts.
Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely.
It's holding some awkward silence before moving on. All right, and next slide, please. Next, I would like to hand it off to Nicole Rose to discuss early learning childcare portfolio concept draft decision packages for the 2025-27 biennium.
Thanks, Melissa, and thanks for walking us through all of the things that have passed during this last session, and thanks to everyone for their questions on this. So I'm gonna go through some of this a bit quickly and try and give us a little bit of time at the end for any questions. One of the things we'll talk about today is just sort of the timeline for the agency around our decision package, agency request legislation process. I'm going to share with you the early learning division draft decision package concepts and connections to the Fair Start for Kids Act recommendations. And remember, when I say that, I'm talking a little bit more broadly about some of the TLS recommendations as well. And like I said, hopefully we'll have time for some questions, but just want to be really clear that these are very draft. They have not even gone through our agency approval process yet. I think one of the things as we go to the next slides, I don't think anything you see here shouldn't be too new to you today. They are things that we've been talking about with a couple of things that you may have heard about or seen before. So if we want to go to the next slide. So this is our timeline within the agency for our proposals around decision packages and agency request legislation. And where it says LT, that means our leadership team. And so we are in the months of April now. So our teams have been hard at work thinking through what some of those concepts look like. At the end of this month, myself and the other leadership team members will be coming together to have an initial discussion and decision about what concepts would move forward for some further decision package or agency request legislation development. Then in May, we would have a second round decision, and then in June, a final decision from our leadership table around the decision packages that move forward, with these being submitted to the Office of Financial Management sometime in the month of September. So you're getting a preview of things that we are thinking about. So if we want to go to the next slide. Just want to ground us in some of the things that are already in law. And many of you have seen this slide before, and this is pulling from the Fair Start for Kids Act. And I'm going to start with what is on the right-hand side, and that is childcare subsidy eligibility and expanded eligibility for childcare subsidy. And it is in law that beginning July 1, 2025, that we move from 60% of state median income to someone who is above 60% or at or below 75% of the state median income for their family would be eligible for Working Connections childcare as long as they meet the other criteria that are listed there. And so that's something we would consider a maintenance level ask. And then I'm going to take us to the left-hand side of the slide where it is going over what is in law related to childcare subsidy rates. And I'm going to call your attention to the information just above the bold wording where that really talks about that childcare subsidy based rates must achieve the 85th percentile of market for licensed or certified childcare providers. So that's what's in existing law right now. And then the bold language is really where we've been asked to build upon the work of the Child Care Collaborative Task Force and create the cost of quality care model, which Matt and others have come and talked with this group about. And so we will have a decision package related to those rates, moving to the cost of quality, but that will be considered a policy level package. So if we want to go to the next slide. One of the things that we are really working towards is that access and living wage proviso. And we really see these three things that are circled in this slide: the cost of quality care rate model, Working Connections eligibility expansion, and ECAP entitlement as all parts that add up to that foundation of access and living wage. And so you'll hear us really talk about a lot of that throughout the next several months, just because we feel like these things are really important to make sure that that foundation is solid. We know that additional investments are needed there. And part of that is about rates, and it's about increasing the number of families that are eligible. So we need to really continue to look at both of those things. So if we go to the next slide. This is showing you the 5 things. We are thinking about 5 things. You've seen 3 of them before, but we're thinking about 5 things that we would be asking for. And the ones that have asterisks are really connected to some of what we've seen in Fair Start for Kids Act or the TLS recommendations. So I'm going to talk about ECAP entitlement, eligibility expansion, cost of quality care rate model, CCDF, the updated regulations, and child welfare, child care. It may be newer concepts today, but we've talked about child welfare, child care before as we've done some asks. So those are the 5 things I'm going to walk us through here as we move to the next slide. So when we talk about expanding eligibility to 75% of the state median income, that really moves us to about a family of 3 making about $6,300 per month or about $75,000 per year. And our initial estimates on this is about 9,500 more families that we think would be eligible and would take us up on participating in Working Connections childcare. The next one on this slide is ECAP entitlement. And you'll see in here that when we think about ECAP entitlement, it's not just about the slots. We need to continue to work towards the rates that we did a rate study on, where we need to increase the rates. There were some rate increases we got this last legislative session. We know we're not all the way there yet, so we'll continue to ask for those rate increases. as well as some other supports to meet entitlement. And what I mean by that are things like being able to pay for the curricula that we require in ECAP, being able to pay for Teaching Strategies Gold, which is the whole child assessment that we use in ECAP. Being able to increase the number of scholarships that we have available so that our ECAP providers and teachers can have access to scholarship dollars to meet the ECAP requirements. And then we need to ask for the slots. And based on the latest forecast, we're looking at probably about 4,400 slots or so. And then DCYF has had a commitment to having as many school day slots as possible. So we would be looking at not only the number of slots, but potentially some conversion from part day to school day slots as well. The third thing we have on here is the cost of quality childcare rates. And as we've discussed, these include personnel, non-personnel, and quality enhancements. And so, again, this is really foundational to getting towards that larger proviso work of access and living wages. So those are the three that you've probably heard us talk about the most. We're working on, again, costing these out and going through the process of bringing those to the DCYF leadership table. I'm going to share two more that may be a little bit newer for you all, and then I will pause and open it up for questions. So you may have heard that there were recently some new rules that came out related to the Child Care Development Fund, which are really great rules that help us really think about how we can bring the childcare market much closer to the private market when we think about subsidy. And so these include things like enrollment-based pay, prospective provider subsidy payment, where we're paying someone at the beginning of the month rather than billing at the end of the month. When my children were in care, that's certainly what I had to do. And I suspect what many of you all are doing as you are working with your families who are paying without a subsidy. The other thing that the new rules require us to do is to really contemplate and think about how we provide some services through grants and contracts in underserved geographic areas. That might be something like a childcare desert, or perhaps where there are high rates of child abuse and neglect. Maybe where there is lack of access for infants and toddlers, which could probably be most of the places in our state, as well as how we might think about grants and contracts as another way of increasing services around inclusion and meeting the needs of children with disabilities. We're waiting more guidance on what that means to do the grants and contracts pieces, really to better understand what the Office of Child Care expectations are there. We also recently had an Office of Child Care monitoring visit. And one of the things that they talked with us about was 12-month eligibility. And there are a couple of things. So one is children added during the eligibility period, which is part of the new rules. So let's say I have been approved and I've got a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, and then I have a new baby. We want to then really think about how we can take and increase that eligibility period for that entire household an additional 12 months. Rather than maybe it might have just been, well, maybe when that happened, I had 3 or 4 months left on my certification period, but this is asking us to look at that entire 12 months. The other thing that we're looking at is, let's say you're approved for subsidy on January 15th. As we look at 12-month eligibility, we say, okay, you were approved on January 15th, and that benefit goes all the way through the end of the calendar year. And we are being asked to look at how might we take that through January 14th or 15th of the following year to get that full 12 months. Julie, I see your hand is up.
Okay, so I was a little distracted. Did you say it's potentially that subsidy could be billed at, like, paid at the beginning of the month?
the new rules ask us to do prospective provider payment so that we're paying at the beginning of the month before services are provided. There are many things that DCYF has to look at here, and we are looking at around sort of what RCW changes might need to be made, and those pieces. One of the things I'll note is that while these requirements came out before the increased CCDF funds came out, but the amount of increased CCDF dollars that we will be receiving will not cover what it will cost us to do these things that are listed in here.
Okay, I thought that's what you said, and I just thought, what would that do for, you know, you bill at the beginning of the month and then a family disappears, or they give 2 weeks notice. Then there's this back and forth payment thing happening.
Well, and those are all rules, Julie, that we're gonna have to figure out. And I think our team is really trying to think through what are all the different scenarios we need to be thinking about. And it may be something that we can bring back to this group, like help us think about, did we get this right? So more to come on that.
Yeah, nobody likes to owe DCYF money. That's, I
we
mean,
don't-
billing at the beginning, yay.
Yeah, we don't want you to owe us money either, right? So we want to think about what is the best way to do this that makes the most sense for all involved and really reduces administrative burden for you all and for DCYF as well. So the other thing I'll note about these requirements for the Child Care Development Fund, these actually go into effect at the end of this month. And as I said, these have quite a large price tag with them for which we do not have money to implement at this point in time. And so states do have the ability to ask for a waiver for up to 2 years. I want to be really transparent with this group. We heard a lot of feedback at the Early Learning Advisory Committee that that they would like to see us make sure that we're asking for this to be implemented as soon as possible, and that we ask for funds to do this across the entire biennium, not just when we think if we were to get a waiver that would go into effect. So that's certainly something I'll be bringing to our leadership table, that we ask for funding across the entire 2 years here. And then ongoing. The last one on here is child welfare, childcare, and working connections childcare. And at this point in time, we do still have child welfare, childcare, and working connections childcare within our agency. We do pull down some Title IV funds and some general fund state dollars to support child welfare, childcare. And we've been doing a lot of work with our partners in child welfare to really think about how might we be able to merge these two together and think about how we can really provide continuity of care and access to high quality early learning for children who are in out of home placement through permanency. And so that might look like us asking for a longer certification period or eligibility period for children and families. So maybe instead of 12 months, it's a 24-month period. So we're working through what this would look like. We also hear from some that the ability or inability to have access to childcare can sometimes delay permanency or adoption. And we want to remove that barrier because we want to get to permanency. And so this is also a concept that we are working on. This is not the first time we have asked for this, so we're going to try again. We believe it is something that's really beneficial, and we know that access to high quality care and the services that you all provide are really a protective factor and a preventative factor in and of itself. So, and I acknowledge we have a minute left. So in that last minute, I will just see if there are any other questions. As I said, these are draft concepts. These have not all been approved, but wanted to put them in front of you all so you know what we're thinking as we go through this, and happy to commit to coming back in June. And then again, I believe in August, as we go through the process. I think we've tried to get into a regular cadence of doing that so you can sort of see where we're at with development of these.
Oh, well, it looks like we are questionless at this point. So, Jessica dropped the Menti into the chat. Make sure that you go there, put your comments in about this presentation. And if you missed the opportunity to put feedback in about other areas, other presentations, feel free to use the Menti for that too. I want to mention again that we have 2 announcements. We've got the vacancy on this committee for a co-chair. We want to get back to having a third, so we'd have a tri-chair type of scenario again, which helps with coverage when a chair is unable to attend. Also, ELAC is looking for provider panelists that have been negatively impacted by TK in their area, where, you know, reduction in their preschool enrollments, kids being recruited out of their preschool programs, or if you know a provider that's had to shut down their preschool classroom for that scenario. So you could certainly give out the information to somebody that you know if you were not the one personally impacted. Our next meeting is scheduled for June 11th. I know there was something that went out that said the 12th. It's actually on the June 11th. And then there's going to be an FSKA recommendation report development session on May 14th. I'm assuming we'll all get an email about that with the information about how to join. So that's it for today. If anybody has any questions, make sure we've got the right date on the screen. Yay. So use the Menti, provide some feedback, and have a great rest of your week. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Nicole.
Thanks all. Great day.
Thanks, Melissa.